Welcome to The Last Cast, HBO's unofficial The Last of Us recap podcast. This show, hosted each week by me, Jack, and Andrew,
Hello.
will take a deeper look into the mega TV series event by the same name, The Last of Us. We'll break down, assess, compare, contrast, and have a bit of fun as we go. So grab yourself a cup of Joel's favorite blend and let's get on with it. We're working our way to Bill.
What do you think Joel's favorite blend is? Dark, medium, or light?
Jark.
Jark.
Joel strikes me as a dark roast.
There you
Dark
go.
to medium.
It's a flavorful, but not too
strong.
caffeinated. Yeah, flavorful, but not too caffeinated. All right.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
I get that vibe. Maybe on long days, like long construction days.
It's been a long day.
Yeah. Let's get that light roast going.
Let's get that light roast going. Maybe on Sundays.
Yeah. So, hello everyone and welcome back. We had such an incredible response to this podcast. Andrew, first of all, we already got 2 amazing reviews over on iTunes.
What?
I don't know if you saw those. I'll read them for you real quick.
They listened to us?
They listened to us.
They listened to me when I told them to go review the show?
They did.
Wow.
They did. So review number 1 came in on Wednesday, and just bear with us, guys. We think it's important to appreciate y'all if you're appreciating us. From Last of Us fan 626. Great show. Have heard Wayfarin Strangers and so glad to see you're doing the HBO show. I'm a girl gamer and obsessed with The Last of Us. My partner isn't, but I'm making her watch the show. So you guys are my outlet to geek out about everything with this show and The Last of Us universe. Keep up the good work and can't wait to take this journey with you. And that's Colleen. Thank you so much for the review.
Colleen, in this house, we refer to that as kicking and screaming. It's when you know your partner will enjoy a thing, yet they are hesitant to begin it. So you literally have to drag them kicking and screaming to it.
It's true. It's true.
Place your eyes on this. So, yes.
It's true. Yes. And I do that all the time with Andrew.
Wait a minute. No. No.
This is a different podcast.
How dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you?
It's usually the other way
It's
around.
quite literally the opposite.
It is certainly an uphill battle for Andrew with everything, truly, with me. But and our second review came on Sunday from, and you'll love this, Andrew, The Matrix.
The Matrix?
The Matrix.
Oh,
yes.
shit.
Yes. Huge Keanu Reeves fan in this house, especially Andrew. He did over 100 episode podcast dedicated to Keanu Reeves called Cool Breeze Over the Mountains, if anybody is curious.
Available wherever you get podcasts.
Yeah. See? But Sunday review came in from The Matrix saying, great breakdown, especially for anyone not familiar with the game. This pod takes care to explain the adaptations from the game. Nice job. P.S. Missed the clicker on the roof in the final scene. So we didn't technically miss the clicker. We just didn't name it because we didn't want to spoil people.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're
going to call them what they are.
Yeah. Let's call them how we see them. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Just a little bit of intro before we go into kind of the opening conversation of the show. But real quick, thank you guys for the reviews. We appreciate you, and we love that you're loving this show. And the numbers and the downloads for The Last Cast are they make me nervous because it's a lot, and we're not necessarily used to that right out of the gate. So welcome.
It's great. We're going to be good.
Yeah, we're good. And so just real quick, a few things with this show. We're going to change up a little bit of the quote unquote formula that we talked about on our first episode. And we're bringing basically the identical situation that we do with Wayfarin Strangers, our other and first Last of Us podcast for anyone who is new. And basically breaking down sections, having some commentary before moving on, because we rushed through a lot of things from episode 1. We missed a few things. And that's why also these podcasts will be dropping on Tuesdays at the latest Wednesday afternoon. So we don't miss anything. we don't have early access. We have to watch at 9 p.m. on Sundays with everyone else and then rewatch once or twice. Takes some time. We just want to make sure we like dot all the I's, cross all the T's. So thank you for
Right.
giving us a little bit of extra time. And yeah. But to speak of that, things that we missed. I'm gonna skip over the thing because I know you're gonna tackle that real quick, Andy.
Yeah.
But so the food topic, that was an insert that I put into episode 1 that I recorded separately while I
Smart.
was editing the show because I wanted to talk about it. But again, so many things fell through the cracks because we were rushing to get the show done. No more of that. No more of that.
There will be no rushing.
And it was confirmed that cordyceps, the CBI outbreak, cordyceps brain infection, which is what CBI stands for in the games, was confirmed on the show to originate from flour and grain factories. So it had nothing to do with, you know, Grandma Adler going back and forth to the hospital. Not even with, I noticed in episode 1, the student that was sitting next to Sarah was twitching. And Sarah picked up on this because the medical bracelet appeared to be a medical bracelet, a gold medical bracelet.
Yeah.
Sometimes, often for diabetes, people who have diabetes, type 1 or type 2, typically type 1. I found, like, I've known people with type 1 who usually have those bracelets, but again, I don't want to speak for anyone. But I did some digging and I tried to see if Neil Druckmann or Craig Mazin would confirm or deny on Twitter, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that confirmed or denied.
Craig.
Yeah. Well, Craig's not really on Twitter anymore. Anyway, so yes, the food conversation. Basically, the reason why Sarah, Tommy, and Joel did not get infected is because they didn't have any of the biscuits. They didn't eat any of the oatmeal raisin cookies because ain't nobody eating those. And Joel forgot pancake mix and then forgot his own birthday cake. So all the flour actually prevented their untimely deaths and allowed this story to be.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
Yeah. So the section in, and I'm going to jump just kind of all over the place here, a little out of order because that's how my brain works when I do notes sometimes. So thanks for dealing with that.
Sure.
But the killing time / your watch is broken section. One, is this a double entendre? Because the expression killing time, and I never really thought of this, even when I was going through The Last of Us Part 1 for the podcast on Wayfarin Strangers. Like Joel lays down in the apartment and he's like, you know, Ellie's like, what are you doing? He's killing time. And then the next thing is your watch is broken. And I'm like the association between Joel and Sarah being killed and now Joel is killing time and then Ellie talks about a watch, which keeps time. So I was like, is this a double entendre? Or is this like does it have a hitting median? I don't know. But I just wanted to say that. That's because my brain.
Fair. No, that's
and
smart.
And somebody did ask us how we felt about that scene in particular. And for me personally, I find that the impact was greater in the game than it was on the show, but it was still pleasant to see it on the Last of Us show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They played it pretty straight. It was like a very matter-of-fact delivery for that one, and then they moved on from it pretty quickly as well. Yeah. So it lingers a little bit longer in the game, and so it has a little bit more weight to it. But again, as we're seeing, even in this episode that we're about to talk about, they dot little things throughout that I think are meant to be just like quick hits.
Yeah.
That will eventually add up to something pretty huge, I think.
Yeah. And one last, tidbit about the flow of our show. Like we adjusted the formula. We're also going to have a little bit of a spoiler section at the very end, not for future events on the show, but rather things that the show did that were either identical or extremely similar to what happened in the game.
Yeah.
So
we should call that video game ass shit. That whole section.
That whole section is now going to be called video game ass shit. So if that's not for you,
yes,
bank on it being about 5 to 7 minutes long, and then you can skip, but it'll be at the end of the show. So you're not going to miss much. Yeah.
All right.
Next talking point was Joel's micro expressions when burning the bodies, especially the child. So I've watched this scene a lot now, and a part of me feels like I'm seeing things that aren't necessarily there. based off of listener comments that we've received saying, I don't agree with people saying that Joel was absolutely shut down or, in just this kind of like robot mode to
Hmm.
do his job and move on to exhibit this like broken, shattered man, essentially. He is broken and he is shattered. However, we have seen now episodes 1 and 2 and more emotion and more micro expressions on Joel's face in reaction to devastating things, annoying things, general things, scary things. I'm gonna stick with he really didn't exhibit much emotion when throwing that kid into the pyre,
I
and
agree.
that just kind of really shows how far he's descended into the just like being empty.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. The fact that he didn't hesitate
Yeah.
in
Yep.
my estimation,
Uh-huh.
and it was just like like you know, I don't know, like a sack of flour, to put
Yeah.
it in, just like, all right, next, go back to the
Next.
truck, get
Hmm.
the next one. Yeah, I'm 100% on board. He was just eyes on the prize for that one. Like, just want
Hmm.
to get my ration cards. Let's
Hmm.
do whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, which is awful, and it breaks my heart because Joel's, the be all end all. But next talking point. So Ellie's reveal, in my opinion, and again, these are things that we just forgot to mention, but
Mm,
Ellie's reveal that she was infected, and then I mean, we're so far away. They did it differently in the game. It was more pronounced in the game.
yeah,
Um, it was, this really fervent scene in the show. Joel is still kind of coming out of that PTSD haze. He's not really paying attention to Tess being like, "Joel?" Like, she kind of drags that out, which was awesome because she was just terrified in that moment to think, terrified and pissed off probably at
yeah,
Marlene. I thought the impact was it hit a little less, but then what happens between Joel and Ellie hit a little harder with him defending her. So again, balancing scales a little bit here, um, in doing things differently.
yeah. No,
Mhm.
I agree. Yeah,
I already talked about the student twitching, and okay, so the last talking point
for you, yeah.
for me, and Andrew's laughing. I'm gonna make this real quick, and I'm gonna keep it simple. And yeah, I'm not gonna.
I almost
Honestly,
had the audio queued. I literally almost pulled the audio, and I was like, no, we
no,
don't want to cross the streams. We don't want to get into different pop culture.
yeah.
Just, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and we'll reference the GIF after I have this conversation. I'm not gonna talk about this anymore on the episode beyond this,
Okay.
because this has been just an uphill battle and conversation with, and it's listen, I'm always open to critique, like constructive criticism and honest, debatable topics being exchanged back and forth. But when I said vindicated, like about the fact that episode 1 opened up talking about laying it out in 1968, there is no cure. And I've been saying that on Wayfarin Strangers since episode 1.
Yeah.
And now on episode 1 on the HBO show, bam, we're getting hit with it again. And now episode 2 did the same damn thing 35 years later.
Right.
So the argument that people are coming back with, which by the way, there are no absolutes in these conversations. So my opinion is my own, which doesn't make it absolutely correct. If you disagree with me, that does not mean you are absolutely correct either. And approaching me and saying, "I don't think you should celebrate so soon, Jack," is rude for one, and two, it's condescending. And the argument of this is a video game and the premise is the gamer needs to believe without a doubt that there is a cure no matter what real life science says is completely that's empty for me. That doesn't work. You cannot have so much real world and reality into a fictional property, and then the whole thing is predicated on this, oh yeah, this random dude, this random thing totally exists, and it's like, no, we're not going to go there. So I still feel vindicated in my opinion, and the fact that we are now 2 for 2 episodes with a 35-year gap showing that technology has done zero in that amount of time to develop anything that could easily be worked on or referenced, I'm sticking with how I feel.
Yeah.
If you don't like that and this upsets you to the point where you don't want to listen to the show anymore, that's fine. I'm good.
All we have to do when watching and watching critically, because again, we're not just Jack and I, we're not actually, we don't just sit down and watch the show and then boom. It's several, it's like several watches. And I know people watch several times for
Sure.
pleasure as well, not
Yeah.
for the sake of taking, diligent notes and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When a show presents you with evidence or says a fact that is
Mm-hmm.
true in the universe of the show,
Yeah.
unless they give you some reason to doubt the validity of the claim, you have to take it at face value. That's
Yes.
kind of the agreement that you make when you engage with a piece of media.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that set up
to be taken down? Yes.
Correct. Is the possibility of the setup in fact to be proven wrong?
Mm-hmm.
It could be. But at this stage of what we have seen so far, you have to go on the assumption that there was no cure at the time of the outbreak. And so any progress that would have been made on that, like you would be like, oh, now in this universe of 2023, what we are living in right now, I'm talking about real life.
Yeah.
We're on the way to finding a cure for a fungal That's incredible. However, in the universe of the show, that shit did not happen. And the progress would have come to almost a complete halt in 2003.
Yeah,
when many of
everyone died.
Yes, when many of the foremost people in the field, including the first character we meet, a preeminent mycologist, dies.
Yeah.
So that's all we're saying. I 100% agree with you. When I watched the episode and they start again with another banger of a cold open,
which fucking great.
Yeah, that completely reinforced how we felt. It was just nice to see the modern day equivalent of it. Like we had the 68 version of it in the cold open in the first episode. Then we cut to basically present day when probably just a few.
It was 2 days before.
Yeah, days before we meet Joel and Ellie, right? Or Joel and Sarah, rather. And just have that point reinforced is powerful. Well done.
Yes. And that is all that to say, my vindication is sound and solid because of what Andrew just said, that these are the facts presented to us. These are what we are supposed to believe. And these are the facts of reality, even in 2023. So now, even 20 years later, with a perfectly functioning scientific community still working on this shit, they do not have it down. So going off of that, now, will something change in the show because certain writers, certain creators that are involved, and I will not say anything else because I don't want to spoil anybody, because they love, one, division, and two, just throwing in that wrench of suspension of disbelief that we have to go with?
Of course.
That will change. But in reality, I'm always going to be right. Like and until the year or the month or the day happens where I'm like somebody, a scientist, a mycologist, an epidemiologist, somebody says, we've done it, then your girl will sing a different tune. But please, I'm asking respectfully, do not email me and speak down to me if you disagree with my opinion.
That's right.
I'm very open to having a dialogue with you, but you're never going to get something from me if you start with, don't be celebrating yet, Jack. Because one, you don't know me. And two,
I'm going to be celebrating.
Yeah.
First of all, I am celebrating. The Last of Us exists in television.
Yes.
I'm celebrating every fucking Sunday at 9 p.m.
We're here fucking doing this. Like, you and so I was away, for the last 4 or 5 days, whatever. And I literally got home a day early. I was supposed to record at the cabin. Like, I was in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
So everything got delayed, which is why this podcast was delayed. but I, watched it on a tiny little MacBook screen, and like still it was just, I can't wait to watch it on our TV, side note. But
It's not going to happen.
it's just such an experience still that I can't believe it's real. And yeah, it is going to happen. But all right. So, quick little reminders before we get into the show. Finally, at 20-ish minutes in, there will be no spoilers on this show for story or plot points that will likely inevitably come in the ensuing episodes.
Correct.
Not happening. The drop schedule will be Tuesdays or Wednesdays. We talked about that. I'm just kind of reaffirming it. And if you would like to contact us and this show, if you would like to leave us an email, if you want to follow us, send us a direct message, go over to Twitter, TLOU Podcast, go over to Instagram, TLOU Podcasts, and our email is tloupodcast@gmail.com. So
Boom.
that's that. And again, we have Wayfarin Strangers, which is our current ongoing show covering the games and all of the stuff over just for The Last of Us. So
Done.
let's get into this. Andrew, tell us what episode 2, titled Infected, was about.
The episode summary, as foretold by HBO, goes like this. After escaping the QZ, Joel and Tess clash over Ellie's fate while navigating the ruins of a long-abandoned Boston.
Yeah, that does cover it.
That does cover it, but I want to cover it a little bit better.
Yeah, give me it.
Here's what happens in the episode at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
We start in Jakarta, Indonesia, which seems to be ground zero for the outbreak. I had done a little research, and apparently Jakarta is one of the largest producers of flour and grain in the world. So this tracks. A mycologist who, and I quote, has spent her entire life studying these things, tells us that there's no vaccine or medicine that could stop this. Her proposed solution is a single syllable: bomb. Start bombing. Bomb the city and everyone in it. Ellie, meanwhile, has lived longer than any other infected person in history. Joel remains skeptical of this fact, though. We learn there's a Firefly camp full of doctors out west that are working on a vaccine, but Joel said he's heard all of this before. The group comes across a swampy hotel, and they meet Reginald, a frog who is an expert piano player.
Oh, Reggie.
From the roof of said hotel, they determined that their plan of taking the long way is a no-go. At least 100 infected lay in wait, writhing in unison as the sun passes over them. We learn through this visual and from Tess that they are all connected, and that one wrong step could act as a tripwire to call an entire horde. They opt for the short way through the Bostonian Museum. The building gets more horrifying and dangerous the deeper our heroes venture in. Eventually, we meet a new kind of infected, one foreshadowed by Ellie on their walk there. It makes a strange clicking noise, like echolocation, and eventually 2 of these clickers begin chasing Joel, Ellie, and Tess. After losing one on a brief chase, Joel shines a flashlight in its face, and the monster doesn't even notice, confirming to us that they track through sound alone. Clickers are fast and aggressive, but like any other infected we've met, you can kill it with a well-placed headshot, which Joel does eventually. Everyone survives the encounter, but Ellie is bitten again. Well, if it was going to happen to one of us, she jokes.
Yeah.
Our relief is short-lived, however, when we discover Tess was also bitten. Ellie's wound is barely a scratch on her arm, but Tess's neck looks awful in comparison. Making matters worse, the fireflies at the meetup point are dead, and some died infected. Killing one of these infected fireflies summons the horde through the little tripwire that I talked about.
Yeah.
Tess sacrifices herself in a massive explosion that also kills dozens of infected people running in their direction. But not before one of these little mushroom boys plants a big old smooch right on her mouth. Yuck.
We'll get to that.
That's what I got. How was that? Not bad.
It was good. It was long. I think now I'm like, why are we going to break it down now?
Let's go. We're going scene by scene.
All right.
You know?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's begin this episode 2 infected breakdown. So we are in Jakarta, Indonesia, and it is September 24th, 2003. We're greeted to people eating in a cafe, and then shortly thereafter, we meet a woman named Ibu Ratna, who is a professor of mycology from the University of Indonesia, and she is taken from the cafe to a local hospital. She examines. I'm not a scientist, people, so I'm going to do my best. But she examines a specimen under a microscope and identifies it as
Ophio.
Ophiocordyceps, one word, and learns alongside us that this specimen originated from a human being. Ebo goes to examine said human being, who is now a corpse and clearly infected with cordyceps, once she notices the human bite mark on the lower leg. She cuts through it, and we see a bit of fungal growth beneath the skin. I was writhing at this, Andrew, about the
It was a lot. Yeah.
wasn't great. And then it just proceeds to get worse as she moves to the mouth and finds living mycelium in there. And as she pulls it out and notices that it is still alive, she drops the tweezers, hauls ass out of the room, racing out of there. And then we are set in a different location, just a little bit warmer, a lot less sterile, where a conversation takes place regarding presumably patient zero. And we learn that a flour and grain factory is also ground zero, where the corpse that she just, I don't even know, assessed
Hmm.
is the right word. The corpse she just assessed originated from.
Yeah.
And we talk a little bit here about the behavior of infected, and Ibu Ratna gets more terrified as the scene progresses, and she hears the provenance of the patient's infection. And now, not only is the person who bit her unaccounted for, but there are 14 other workers that are who knows where.
Yeah.
And everything changes from this point. She starts shaking. She places her tea back on the table, and the soldier basically gets to the point in the heart of the matter and asks for help, asks for medicine. And Ibu lays it out and says that there is no cure. And the best and only course of action is to bomb the city to stop the infection from spreading. And after that, she requests to be taken home to be with her family because she will be a part of that
Yeah.
and knows that it is over. The horror on this woman's face and the soldier that she interacts with.
Yeah.
I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I want to talk about that first and foremost, but the acting is absolutely extraordinary in this cold open.
It
They are
was,
2 for 2.
yeah, chilling. It was like, they were like, it was
Yeah.
God tier acting from these two
Yes.
people
Mhm.
who, I mean, you know, I
Mhm.
don't know how they cast this, but like, bravo. Like the whoever, however they got these people,
Mhm.
incredible.
Just absolutely incredible. I felt every single moment of this interaction. And to be perfectly honest with you, Andrew, I I know on Wayfair, and we've talked about we don't need to know the origin, we don't need to know anything about it. Having this and having it given to us in this way
Sure.
is perfect. If it had come as a throwaway comment from between Joel and Tess, or if it was a couple newspaper articles sprinkled about here and there in an abandoned building, that our heroes are walking, through a door and bam, we just see this kind of shallow depth of field close up. I would have been like, the impact is just not there.
Yeah.
This was 10 out of 10, like 5 stars out of 5, just perfect, short and to the point, giving us everything that we needed with the horror, the knowledge, and the reality of this situation before we were even introduced to this with Joel and Sarah.
Yeah. This is the scariest part of a story like this is when you can ground it in reality,
Yes.
right? And
Mhm.
that is what they are attempting to do in very, very smart ways,
Mhm.
from the mycelium network that can like trigger these things that actually exists, right?
Mhm.
To how this transmission, establishing that if the temperature of the planet were to rise and
Mhm.
fungus were to adapt to said temperature, it
Mhm.
could live in humans. Like all of these facts that they are giving us make this a lot scarier. It's great.
Yeah, and we are gonna talk a little bit more about the reality behind the science that was introduced in this episode from an actual bona fide scientist working in the fungal field.
What?
Yes, one of my best friends is best friends with a scientist who works in Brazil looking for potential cures and vaccines and so on and so forth, and the his name is Rob.
Okay.
And I know Rob hears about our shows secondhand. I don't necessarily know if he listens directly, but if he does, hello Rob.
Hello,
And
Rob.
he basically watched the episode and wrote in to Gab, our wonderful guitar player and musician that does our open music for both of our shows. That's who I was lucky and fortunate enough to go away with. Um, but basically, and we'll get to that when we get to that particular part. But while there's a lot of realistic and true science, there's a lot of not true stuff happening even
Damn
still.
it.
Yeah. So we have the reality laid out in these two opens,
Mm-hmm.
and then it kind of goes from there, and a little, TV ass shit starts to happen. Um, but yes, I just wanted to focus on the acting for just a little bit because it's just a heavy hitting blow.
Yeah.
Again, 2 for 2, and I love the level beyond the acting, the level of respect between a soldier and a professional scientist in a field that, again, it was looked down upon in 1968 when that man mentioned it on the interview, the
Yeah.
TV show. Everyone was like, "What? Ugh, you're fucking crazy." You know, like there was a level of respect being exchanged between the soldier and Ibu, and I thought that that was extraordinary and very um telling
Mm-hmm.
to the level of severity that the soldier had experienced already to that point.
Yeah.
So, there was so much fear already built up in him, and then he had this glimmer of hope by bringing Ibu Ratna into the equation essentially, and then it was gone, and he was horrified, and so was she.
Yeah.
So it was such an extraordinary scene, and I feel like we're talking about a lot, but I loved it. So yeah.
Great.
The music and the soundtrack commentary. We're going to talk about this a little bit throughout the show. Not just necessarily the soundtrack, but the sound design from this episode was just god tier.
Yeah.
And but the music in this particular opening again felt a little reminiscent of Chernobyl. Very ominous tones, very dark, moody, bad shit's happening, and it just enhanced everything tenfold. To throw it back to episode 1, we knew the conversation that Joel and Sarah had it was a brief conversation about Jakarta in Indonesia.
Yeah.
But it went from this, dun 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 news thing happening to Sarah being like, "I'm the smartest one in this family, boys." Like, and that was wonderful. But I
Sure.
went back and listened, and the actual voice on the radio says disturbances in Jakarta with US citizens advised to avoid traveling, ellipsis. It kind of cuts off there and then goes into Joel and Sarah and Tommy's conversation.
Yeah.
But I liked, again, they're doing something, they're doing extraordinary consistency with the show already.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the first 2 episodes. I mean, they're doing it with the game, they're doing it with its own where they're branching off.
Of course. Yeah. It's
And
great.
this is not always something that you see even in the biggest, like, production TV series. I mean, there were pitfalls in Game of Thrones, there were pitfalls in, like, there were there I have not found a loose end yet. And that is
Right.
kind of like my thing, like, looking
Sure.
for, like, not necessarily purposely looking for.
Prying and picking
Yes,
and
like,
yeah, disassembling and reassembling and
I
all
just
the
have not.
pieces fit right now.
They really do. They really do. But then, roll credits and, again, I'm just loving them so much, and I saw an artist named David Blatt who does incredible Last of Us artwork. He actually did the artwork for The Last of Us Part 1 remake. He was commissioned for that,
Oh, cool.
and, it's just gorgeous, but he broke down the credits just talking about, how the infection swarms and builds up, and we see this city skyline,
Mhm.
And that's where, it's this hard hitting first location, and then it just kinda goes from there, and it was just a beautiful dissection of the credits, so,
Cool.
yeah. But Andrew, take it away.
Oh boy. We cut to an overhead shot of Ellie sleeping in like what appears to be a meadow, but it's just like a store. But
Mhm.
the roof has crashed open and sun pours in, and here we are.
Yeah.
Uh, I thought this was very funny. It made me laugh. She wakes up. She's kind of like dazed. She's looking around. You hear like a behind her, and she turns, and like Tess and Joel are like, pff, like
Yeah.
it's like a whip pan to them. And I mean, I laughed out loud when I saw it. I don't know if it was meant to be funny, but it
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 was.
was. It was very, very funny.
It was funny.
We have a little bit of a standoff between them. I mean, Ellie on one side and Tess and Joel. And this is interesting visually too, because Ellie is in the light. She is literally in sunlight, surrounded by plant
Growth.
life.
Mhm.
And Joel and Tess are in the literally in darkness,
Yeah.
like ominous figures in the darkness. It's like a very cool visual. I loved it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Basically, as I had described, Joel is not he's like, she's going to turn any minute. Like Joel let's just shoot her. Let's just shoot her. It's not worth it. Like that's his thing. So the next thing that happens is we hear about Marlene's plan, right? So apparently there are scientists out west and they're working on a cure, and Ellie factors into that. Again, Joel said he's heard all this before, right? Ellie's like, I got to go up. I'm going to go take a pee. I'm tired of this shit.
Yeah. You guys are
she
being
goes,
weird.
she goes in a room. She's like, is there anything bad back here? And Joel's like, just you. So
Oof.
they're quipping the shit out of each other
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
Uh, Joel's hand is the one that he used to beat someone to death is like shaking a little bit, bloody. He says is probably a hairline fracture, but it'll heal quick, whatever.
Mhm.
Joel and Tess still trying to figure out a way to get this battery, right? The eyes on the prize, they want this battery. This
Mhm.
is the end all be all.
Mhm.
Tess is more willing to accept Ellie as somehow having some immunity versus Joel. He wants nothing to do with this, as we've said. This was a very funny scene. They go to eat, right?
Yeah.
And Tess is like, you want to share some food or whatever? It cuts to Joel like ripping off a kind of a very dry piece of jerky of some
Yeah.
animal, right? Ellie whips out like a full ass chicken sandwich and he's like, just bites it. And the looks from Joel and Tess are like the desire in their eyes. So good. So good. So, this is when Tess kind of switches gears. She's like, I'm going to talk to you like an adult, right?
Mhm.
Joel and I aren't good people. Tell us what the goal is here.
Mhm.
Again, working on the cure. Okay.
Yeah.
Joel's like, Joel again, dubious. Tess is like, let's just do this thing. It doesn't matter what we believe, as long as the Fireflies believe it. We'll get what we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joel says the line from the trailer, but if she twitches even one, and she does
Yeah.
an incredible impression of what we're about to see, or kind of what we're about to see. Tess and Joel want nothing to do with that. So Ellie then asks for and is promptly denied a gun.
Mhm.
This is, as an adult, you don't want a 14-year-old kid carrying around a gun.
No.
I mean, not
Mhm.
even in this post. Just let us do this.
Mhm.
Joel says, okay, we're going to do that. Let's head out this door over here.
Mhm.
The door makes a very specific sound. One that I was like,
Yes, it does.
I was just at the beginning, I was like, wait a minute.
Mhm.
But again, it leads to nothing, but is definitely some foreshadowing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
let's talk about it. Let's break it down.
Yeah, and so I'm actually gonna go with the sound first, so we're gonna backtrack from there, but so they made intentional choices to use everyday world objects like doors, creaking boards that they're walking over as amplification
Mhm.
to the horrifying sounds that fans of the game have literally come to know, love, and fear.
Yeah.
That was such an incredibly interesting choice because, like you said, like Joel opens that door and I was like, "Oh my god, there's a fucking clicker right there." Like I was like, "Is that how they're going to introduce clickers?" But he did not react.
Yeah.
And I did. Like fans of the game absolutely reacted to that. And it was such a sweet moment to be a gamer, like a fan of the games rather.
Mhm.
But it shows how much the game impacted its players, but it in tandem shows how Joel and Tess have this level of habitual knowing of
Yeah.
the world around them. And they're not flinching when opening a door because they know it's not a clicker or an
Correct.
infected, this, that, or the other. So it's unnerving for us and it's usual for them. And that was such an interesting take that I literally paused and I was like, oh shit. Like subtle things that they are doing
Yeah.
in that way are really mind-blowing in my humble opinion.
IMHO. Well done, Craig.
Yes.
Well done, Neil. Well done, team.
And Neil Druckmann directed. This was his directorial debut. So
Wow. Okay.
fantastic job. We
Yeah.
already talked about Ellie amidst all of the growth, but I think you did a really good job with that. Like it just opens with her laying in the fetal position
Mhm.
amidst all of this green and life and light. Just
Yep.
green life and light, and then the two people who are just completely unconvinced and who are hurt and jaded and broken adults are in the dark.
Yeah.
And there's so many different metaphors and ways that people could interpret this, but I think when it comes to The Last of Us, it's that when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light, and they are
Yeah.
doing such a good job of showing Ellie as that light.
The light is right there,
It's
you know,
right there. Yeah.
but they're not, or, at this point,
They're not seeing it.
they're not seeing it. Yeah.
Mm-mm. No. Ellie's bite mark. Speaking of Ellie, so her bite mark, we finally get to see it in much better light because it was
Sure.
dark and raining when we first see it. Uh, in the end of episode 1, but it's less of a bite and more. And it again it appears to me to be more of a sting, like a
Mhm.
tendril sting, which I think is both elegant and completely disturbing at the same time.
Yeah.
Because the bite she gets later on this episode is like teeth, like full on teeth bite. But you know, from what we know and what I'm not going to talk about on this show because we don't do spoilers, but how she gets bit, she mentions it a little bit at a mall. We learn shortly that it was at a mall,
Mhm.
this, that, and the other. It'll be interesting to see the Left Behind episode because Left Behind, of course, is the DLC, which was released in February 2014 after The Last of Us came out. And it basically tells you all about the bite, and I'll leave it at there.
Yeah. Ellie's story.
Ellie's story, yes. Ellie's recent story of the 3 weeks when, because it's 3 weeks old, it's 3 weeks old. That's what she kept saying to them at the end of episode 1.
Yeah.
So we have a timeline. But it was just interesting to see it. I like what they did. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit gentler looking
Mhm. Mhm.
overall, I think might be a subtle way of saying things, but yeah. I love just a side little tidbit. We talk a lot about on our other show about the realities of things we would love to see Joel and Ellie specifically, because that's the majority of the journey of The Last of Us Part 1,
Sure.
come up against. So camping, food, how they deal with rain, like, brushing their teeth, whatever, little minor things. So I loved that Tess like threw a Glamour magazine at Ellie for her to use as toilet paper.
Rip a couple pages out.
Yeah, it was simple, but I was like, damn, that's all we need
Yeah.
to ground us in the reality of, yeah, when you need to, do your business, like this is all that's available to you.
Of course.
Yeah. Last, before moving on, Ellie's impersonation of the infected
So
was
good.
gold.
Yep.
We saw this with the trailer. We commented on it months ago, but Bella Ramsey is really serving Ellie
Mhm.
with some of these moments that just have a really good seamless transition. And, I do have a couple bones of contention to talk about with this episode,
Sure.
and they are primarily Ellie based, but overall I think, at this point I'm giving her like a 9 out of a 10. So, yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's high praise. That's high
Yeah.
praise.
Yeah. And but I will say if certain things don't change, it's gonna drop a little bit, but we'll get to those. So,
Okay.
but we're outside now. Everyone's awake. They did their business. We're outside. And we see what's become of the city. And we learn that the military bombed the cities to slow the spread, which is, again, a follow up and a consistency, a thread to the cold open of the show.
Mhm.
And it worked in Boston, but not so much in other cities. Tess imparts this knowledge on us. And we see the State House up ahead. We don't see the State House up ahead, excuse me, because it is blocked by a collapsed building and we need to find a way around. And we can take the long way or we can take the we're going to die way. So, of course, we opt to, not die as
Yeah.
Joel, Tess, and Ellie. So we go to the hotel and there is green and green growth and just so much life everywhere. And we're going to
Mhm.
talk about that shortly. But quick little beautiful thing for fans of the Last of Us game, the giraffe stuffed animal
Yep.
lying on the ground being partially obstructed in the middle by dead vines. Oof, I felt that. I 100% felt that. And that's all we're going to talk about with that because we don't do the spoiler thing. But Ellie is curious about the fireflies here and her and Tess are sharing a conversation and this is where Tess kind of gets to the point and just like, what happened when you got bitten? Where were you? What was happening?
Yeah.
What was going on? And Ellie shares a little bit of how she was bitten, says she was in the mall alone when it happened. And Tess does a really nice thing here and just like compliments her.
Yeah. Got a set
Which,
of balls on you, girl.
yeah,
Whatever she says.
yeah, I'm going to say it right now. I'm going to jump ahead, but Anna Torv's Tess is my Tess now. Yep, fully. What she brought to this character is
course.
extraordinary. 10
Yeah.
out of 10. But Joel, ever the silent one, follows behind them. But you know that he's listening. You know he's absorbing, even
Yeah.
as he tries his best to pretend like he doesn't give a fuck. He does. But Tess questions here if anyone is coming after Ellie. And there is absolute character information and personality traits and very core principles of Ellie being established here.
Mhm.
And if you would like to know more about this, listen to the end of our show in the spoiler section where we link game canon
Yeah.
to TV show introductions.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Ellie learns here that there's not really swarms of infected roaming the city, which is not necessarily what turns out to be true in this episode. They are, but they're not. It's a weird
Yeah.
thing
Not
happening.
not roaming.
Waiting.
It talks a little bit about I think it speaks to the misinformation of
Yeah.
what you hear behind the safety of the walls.
Yeah.
And that's more of a mechanism of keeping you in line.
Oh, I agree. Control.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's all about control with Fedra. But Tess here denies a lot of what Ellie is trying to learn on the subject of the infected. And she nails it with every commentary. Like an infected that has a split open head and sees like bats, to quote. And Tess doesn't necessarily deny that one, but looks to Joel with a very ominous, like, oh fuck. Like,
Yeah.
let's hope we don't see that one.
The other one was great. It was like a giant uh some sort of giant infected that blows up spores all over you or something like that.
And yeah, yes.
And they're like, and like Tess is like, shit, I hope that's not out there. It was good.
And we're gonna leave it at that, though. We're gonna leave it at that. We're not gonna talk
leave
about
it.
that. Yeah.
I mean, but that's what she said. She was, yeah, all right.
Yeah. Tess is not spoiling. We're not gonna spoil. That's not what we're doing. But okay, a little bit of commentary before moving on. So Ellie's comment about a crater in the earth from a bombing, she
Mhm.
quotes as fucked up moon. And this is space. This is a little glimpse of Ellie who loves space. And
Mhm.
that's not necessarily a spoiler because it doesn't, it is what it is. It's these little beautiful breadcrumbs being put into the show. And I'm just so happy that they don't skip things like that. And I believe that the next, oh God, we only have 7 episodes left. I know, I just got sad, but I believe the next 7 episodes will continue to build on these traits and these characterizations that are absolutely beautiful. And again, if you're a new listener, if you're new to The Last of Us, if you have any interest at all in experiencing this story, in a different way, because this show already is changing a lot. If you're willing to do that, I highly encourage going to the games. They're absolutely stunning. Even if you're not a gamer, go and watch a replay. I'm actually in the middle of playing The Last of Us Part 1 over on Twitch, so if you're interested, just twitch.tv/ Jaded Vader. But anyway, so Tess has a natural and maternal instinct here, and I'm not talking about this just because every single woman has to have this innate, talent for being maternal. That's not what's happening here. I think what Anna Torv brought to this character is why it works so well. And I don't know Anna Torv personally, obviously. I don't know anything to do with her personal life. I don't know if she has kids or not. I don't care. It just is a beautiful choice that they made with her leaning more into, like, I will teach this child what I can while I'm here with her, no matter how
Yeah.
long. Like, subtle things, I will shield her from things that she doesn't need to know about. And I'm not saying that Annie Wershing, who was the voice and actor for Tess in the video games, I'm not saying she didn't do that. She certainly did it more than Joel did. But I think Anna Torv leans into it a little bit heavier,
Sure.
but it works really well for me.
I agree.
Yeah, the world building. So, in this episode as a whole, this was a really world building episode overall.
Mhm.
There wasn't a super amount of story as is, compared to episode 1. We're seeing where CBI originated, and we're seeing Boston destroyed, and we're seeing these beautiful landscapes that are just destroyed but still beautiful in their own right. And it's just visually stunning. It's engaging for new viewers of this story, Andrew, but it's like fully realized for fans that have been with the franchise for almost a decade now. And again, just hats off to y'all.
Yeah, I think there are some interesting things they zig where I think we're going to zag
Mhm.
in terms of coming from the gameplay perspective. You and I see, we'll just say, like a building that has smashed into another building, a skyscraper that has, kind of fallen into another one. And we're like, oh, we know where we're going.
Yeah,
No, we don't go there.
we don't go there.
So I actually like that. Some of the stuff, like a hotel, again, at a very high vague level, a hotel plays a role later in the game.
Mhm.
And some of the things that happen in the hotel here happen later there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cool, like, they're picking and choosing what they want to do. They're keeping people familiar with the story, like
Mhm.
us,
Mhm.
on their toes,
Yeah.
but also making it very accessible and grabbing some of the best parts for new viewers as well. It's a great mix.
Yeah, it's perfect. Quick commentary about this. And this has been not super discussed with the game um previously, but there's a lot of color theories involved with The Last of Us,
Mhm.
because Sarah, Ellie, Tess, even the apartment that Tess and Joel shared,
Yeah.
they have pink hues. And there's this theory that everyone in the world that Joel loves has some sort of like pinkish, even if it's like a muted pink or a darker shade of pink to where it's almost a little purpley, that all of the people in his world that he holds dear and close to his heart is clothed in this color. And I don't know
Interesting.
if you noticed that, Andrew, but Sarah's shirt was a little pink. Ellie is wearing kind of like a maroonish pink sweatshirt, but the kind of baseball tee underneath is
Mhm.
like gray with like dark pink, red, maroon sleeves.
Interesting.
Tess is wearing a button up, like muted pink color. It's a really interesting theory that happens and kind of evolves as you move through the games. And I'm interested to see if that moves with the show as well. And, even with the green surrounding them everywhere in this episode, green on the CBI detector that Fedra uses means you're not infected, that
Yeah.
there is still life to be had. And everywhere that we go in this episode, up to the point of Tess's infection, is green.
Mhm.
After that, not so much. Like, the end of this episode, and I know I'm jumping way ahead, but the end of this episode, like, as you see Joel and Ellie walking away, you see some greenery around them, but there's, like, dead shrubs and and it's just a lot more muted than the beginning half of this episode, and I think that they're doing a lot with colors, and I'm really interested to see where that goes.
Yeah. It's an easy way to tell a story
Mhm.
without having to tell us a story at all.
Yeah.
Just that you look back to some of the most visually striking shows of our generation.
Mhm.
Many of them put a huge emphasis on color
Yeah.
and how it plays a role in the world and what it means when a character wears this or that and
Mhm.
how that interplay. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would completely buy that, and now
Mhm.
I'll be on the lookout for it.
Yeah.
We're moving into the hotel.
Yeah, we are.
This is the long way, as they had discussed.
Yeah.
More greenery and some water as we enter. We get a close up of a Gerhard Heinzmann piano,
Mhm.
which is, it's a pretty good piano.
It's a pretty
You're
good
looking at
piano.
$7,000 to $20,000 for a Gerhard.
Yep.
We meet Reginald, as I had discussed earlier. It's a frog hopping across the keys. It gives us a ding.
Yeah.
It's a nice little nice little scare.
Little nod. Yeah.
Ellie and Joel and Tess enter it's a semi-flooded hotel.
Mhm.
Looks a lot of lily pads, a lot of green water everywhere.
Mhm.
We find out Ellie can't swim, but it was very, very funny. There was a little back and forth between Joel and Ellie, and he's like, smart ass, and he like jumps off the last step, and it's just like, he's only up to about his thighs in water. Very funny, very funny.
Yeah.
It is full of life, but it is so gross.
Mhm.
Jump scare with a dead body after a little fun interaction that Ellie has at the counter.
Yeah.
Joel helps her. Kind of like she falls back onto the piano. It's another one, like a piano strike. Joel
Mhm.
helps her. And there's a little moment there where he, after he grabs her, he kind of like looks at his hand, like, am I infected? Like it was it was a small thing, but
Well,
worth noting.
there's 3 layers to that.
Yeah.
If you kinda wanna, like, if you want me to jump in real quick with
Yeah.
that. But I kinda wrote, I was like, Joel helps Ellie, but then yanks his hand away. And
Yes.
and for 3 reasons that popped to mind, and maybe there might be more, but so he has this injury to his hand, which undoubtedly hurts.
Sure.
And then not only that is where he grabbed Ellie, he grabbed her directly onto her infected part of her arm, even though it was
Right.
under the sweatshirt.
Yeah.
So he's thinking, "Fuck, this hurts. 2, it's an open wound. Am I gonna get infected because 'cause I'm touching her?" And I don't believe it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, he's helping a kid again. And I think
Yeah.
it's just it's this multi-layer thing that happened, and it was so quick that I was like, "Wait, did he just," and I was like, "Oh, fuck, he did." And it oh god, it was such a intelligent move, and whoever thought to do that, whether it was Pedro, whether it was Neil and, like, his directorial suggestions, whatever it was perfect.
Yeah.
But Ellie doesn't even realize it, and she's just like, "Oh, thanks," and walks away.
Yeah.
Like,
She just
yeah.
just like on her way,
Just
right?
do.
It was really, really a nice moment. If you did not see that,
Mhm.
I highly recommend just going back and checking out just that tiny moment. It's throwaway
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of the episode, but really
Mhm.
meaningful. Proceeding onward, we get another dose of reality. Tess comes out of the stairwell and like leans against the doorway. She's like, and
Yeah.
Ellie's like, that wasn't so bad. And she's like, try climbing 10 floors with my fucking knees or whatever. It was,
Yeah.
it was very funny.
Yeah.
They walk down the hallway and we find out that like the direction they wanted to go, basically the floor above has collapsed into the hallway where they were headed. So Tess climbs up. Ellie offers to go, but she's like, if you die, we get nothing. So I'm going to go.
Mhm.
And it's going to take me a few minutes to work my way through this rubble. So you two spend some time together down here.
Yeah.
They sit across from each other in the hallway. Ellie's switchblade comes out. Joel compliments it. It's a nice knife, one of those situations. Just what the fuck do we talk about?
Yeah. Don't stab me.
A conversation actually does begin here. It's like general questions. It was very funny. Like Ellie's like, I guess this is on me. so where are you from? Right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
very like, but eventually she starts asking too many personal questions and Joel just shuts that down. He's pass, pass, pass. It's
Mhm,
pretty good.
mhm.
We learn of the infected a little bit, how long they live. That's one question that Ellie asks. That's not about Joel.
Yeah.
Joel says sometimes it's 2 months, sometimes it's 20 years,
Mhm,
right? We
mhm,
don't know why. He doesn't give the answer why, at least,
mhm.
but that's our range that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
He reveals that he's killed a lot of them. And Ellie asks if it's hard for him knowing that they were people once.
Mhm.
He pauses at this one and he says sometimes,
Yeah.
right? And well, we'll get that, but you're like, it's worth looking at the look on his face when he pauses there to answer, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Ellie asks tentatively, she follows that up, what about that Fedra soldier last night, right? Like,
Mhm.
you killed all these infected, they were people. What about
Yeah.
the soldier? But
Mhm.
then Tess interrupts. Um, and she opens the door that is kind of adjacent to them. And she gives a look at Joel like, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah. It's not great. Not great
Yeah.
what she saw outside.
Yeah.
Um, quick talking points before we move on, of course. But so Tess gives Ellie, and this is where some people we might lose some people. So Tess gives Ellie an exasperated look when she gives these constant zingers and one-liners. She did a lot of it. She did a little bit of it in episode 1, but again,
Yeah.
she was with new people and adults, didn't know what the hell was going on, didn't like the plan. That was just a 14-year-old being frustrated. I can absolutely understand and respect that. I think it was just one too many, like, edgy comments that started
Hmm.
to really get on my nerves with this episode. Um,
Interesting.
I think overall, like, Ellie felt too unbalanced in this episode. The highs were very high, like her imitating a clicker and her, with the knife and then, asking the meaningful questions, sharing the mall history to an extent.
Hmm.
Those things were just wonderful. But then the lows were a little too low. Like she was just there's a for for me, being a huge fan of the game, it's my number one everything. Ellie never once was annoying. She was funny, sometimes it was a little ill-timed with certain things, but she was never nasty or like, "Fuck you," like, she was, but she wasn't, like, she does say "fuck you" to Joel in the game, for sure, I'm not gonna
Sure.
but it was in the midst of a conversation that was already tense, and it was never like and I know I have to stop comparing. This is an adaptation, it's not a recreation. But
Hmm.
for me, it was like the teenage annoyance factor that comes with every person in the teen age,
Yeah.
which if you're listening, I apologize, but that is you. Um, it was
I'm
overdone.
sorry. I'm sorry, teens.
Yeah, I'm sorry, teens. It was overdone. That's all. And it doesn't detract much from the episode for me, but it was like, okay, yeah, like we get it. Like so yeah.
That's interesting to me. I didn't get the sense of that. Those I upon rewatch,
Mhm.
I picked up on more of the quips and the kind of attitude, but I took that more as a way of her trying to prove herself to these two people,
Mhm.
right?
Maybe.
Like some of it was like some of it made sense to me. Like when they go into the hotel, right? Joel's like, "How the hell do you know what this place is?"
Well,
And she says like, "Have you heard of books?" Right? And
yes.
I know we're gonna maybe touch on. Let's just get into this. Is like that. It shows that she's smart,
Mhm.
right, and observant,
Mhm.
right,
Curious.
curious, and
Yeah.
doesn't want to be underestimated.
Mhm.
And I don't know of any other way where we could prove those things without her, without Joel being continuing to be a skeptic and her being able to prove him wrong. So I think those two things are in tension for a reason. It
Mhm.
might show character growth later for her when
I
those things aren't present.
I'm sure it will. I think but this lovely moment happens and you brought it up, I think it was an excellent writing moment where it was a mirrored scene essentially.
Mhm.
where Ellie answers Tess with a smart ass reply to the where'd you even learn that? Or maybe it was Joel. I can't remember. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it was.
Like, ever read a book? When questioned how she knows of fancy hotels, but then she literally is smart assed by Joel right after
Yeah.
with the depth of the water. And then she comments with, I don't know how I was supposed to know that. And it's like, there's this perfect balance being shown to us of what she knows, what she doesn't know. And
Yeah.
Ellie is telling us what she knows by being annoying,
Mm-hmm.
and she is learning what she doesn't know by Joel basically calling her out without calling her out on her just being a kid behind the wall.
Right.
And that is a very good, perfect writing moment. And I'm not saying that Ever Read a Book was like one of the moments that annoyed me. That wasn't one of them because it was balanced perfectly immediately thereafter with Joel.
Yeah.
I think in the next, well, the next comment, here we go. Which is kind of a runoff of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, Joel says he's from Texas, Tess is from Detroit, but Ellie, like she's a little bit of a brat here. I'm sorry. I
Mm.
love her, but she's a little bit of a brat here, opening the conversation. And I know, again, it's this teenage behavior. It felt unbalanced and forced for me because
The
she's the
circus
one.
comment.
Well, no, I love the circus comment.
Okay.
Full
All right.
stop. I love the circus comment. That's classic Ellie.
All right.
And that resonates with me. It's the tone, it's the attitude that she's talking. Like, she is the one, excuse me, she's the one that opened this conversation. And Joel, for those who do not know in the games, does not offer information up at fucking all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, for a long time. And this is day one. And Tess is still alive. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm from Texas. Tess is from Detroit. Like, he's giving information here, and she's still being a smartass when she's the one asking for it.
That's
But I think, hold on, I think what it comes down to is she's working up to the moment of asking him about the soldier he killed in her mind for her.
Yeah.
That Craig, quote, a lot said activated her. So I think she's putting on this bravado and this
Mm-hmm.
attitude to get where she needs to go, but she's not getting what she is expecting from Joel with the attitude. So I think Joel is balancing it really well. But in my mind, and I know I have to stop doing this, but in my mind, video game Joel would be like, "Are you fucking done? Like, you're asking me questions and I answer you and I get fucking attitude. This is not going to be a reciprocated conversation if that keeps up."
Well, that conversation specifically is, where are you from, right?
Mhm.
And he says Texas, and then how about and then he kind of snaps back. He's like, Detroit, and then she's like, are you two pass?
Well, no, you skipped the part
What am I missing? Because I was, yeah.
because what happened is, where are you from? Texas. Where's
Yeah.
Tess from? Detroit. And then he goes, which is in Michigan. And she's like, I know where Michigan is.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, calm down. Like, he's answering you.
Yeah.
And then he's like, or she's like, I read books again, or I'm in school. And then, he kind of sasses it back with well, how do you, I
With
can't
the
fucking remember, but
Yeah,
it
no. You're right. You're right. She says she's in school.
mhm.
Then he hits pass, and she's like, "How long do infected live?" And he's like, "I thought you went to school."
Yeah.
And she says it's a real shitty one. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
thought that was a nice continuation of what happened in the hotel lobby, where it was, she proves that she knows something,
mhm.
or gets offended by Joel assuming she doesn't know something,
Yeah.
and then we find out how books will get you.
Only
Book
so far.
smarts will get you pretty far in this world, right? But the real learning is what Joel has had, right?
Mhm.
Like it is interesting. It's an interesting parallel. Like Joel giving a geography, Detroit is in Michigan, and yet Jakarta, is that in Asia? Like there are like kind of
Yeah.
mirror things happening here. Again, that is location is a conversation he had with his daughter
His
on the last
daughter.
episode.
Mhm.
So,
On the
and
last day of her life.
she kind of sassed him too about not knowing where Jakarta was. So again, it was like I was looking at that. I was like, oh, we're seeing parallel things happen here.
Sure.
But again, I take the point that it may have come off as a little abrasive for the character of Ellie, but it didn't for me. But I can certainly see how it might.
Yeah, it was that. And listen, being a brat is not a huge deal. It's not a deal breaker. It's not. I'm just saying, we're all fucking brats sometimes. But
Sure.
I just felt like it was unnecessarily pushing your foot on the gas when he is actually answering you. Like he's not doing what Joel did in the games. Like, let's keep our histories to ourselves. That's a quote from the actual game.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what this Joel is doing.
Yeah.
And I didn't love it. That's all.
Okay.
And I don't have to love every fucking scene.
Hey, fair enough. Yeah. That's why we're here. We're here to discuss. Yeah. We're here to get to the root of it.
Yes. Quick little scene. So we're outside of the hotel.
Yeah.
Tess pulls some tarps aside and basically reveals devastation and horror. Ellie steps up and looks down, and on the ground we see you estimated earlier in their episode about 100 infected,
I'd say,
kind of laying down, slithering around. And we hear, Joel and Tess going back and forth about the recent history of this particular location and also the quarantine zone and how more and more people and more of the city is getting infected and turned every year.
Yeah.
And it's just a horrifying thought. And it's basically at that point, how could you not think like just like a clock, just like tick-tocking until it's our turn, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But something incredibly different gets established here, which breaks away from the game.
Yeah.
And we learn of a mycelium network being established. Fibers like wires, they're all in communication with one another. And she explains that the infected, she explains all of this in a surprisingly comforting way, I felt, with Ellie. Again, there's this warmth happening between Tess and Ellie, which I 100% think is intentional because of what happens to Tess. So it's like, Ellie might be leaning more towards her. You know what I mean? But that's not where the inevitable story is supposed to go. And that brings more layers of heartache, which The Last of Us is fucking great at. But anyway, so this is where they decide to go through the museum versus dealing with the slithering horde below.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, so we got some things to talk about here.
Let's go.
This was my second bone of contention.
I'm ready to debunk this bone.
Yeah. Yes.
Let's bone down.
Yes. What? But so in my my initial.
Here we go.
You
got to hydrate for this one. All right, guys.
Yeah,
here we go.
The infected on the ground is way too close to traditional zombie lore. And I'm not a Walking Dead fan. I'm not a zombie fan by no means, because my stomach actually legitimately cannot handle it. But I remember way back the season premiere. It was the trailer for The Walking Dead.
Sure.
The season 1. And I still close my eyes and I can see a zombie slithering on the fucking ground.
Yeah.
Like trying to get to someone.
Probably to Rick.
Yeah, probably. I don't like that. And I felt like it really detracted from the overall story of this whole different world of infected being based on a fungal outbreak plague, essentially. And moving forward with this episode, I'm going to talk about Stranger Things season 4. Did the hive mind?
Okay.
So the impact of the reveal and the choice to go in that direction definitely hit a lot less than it otherwise could have. And I talked about this with one of my cousins who is a huge Last of Us fan as well. Hi, Erica. But she she was like, okay, but Armageddon and Deep Impact came out the same fucking year too. Nobody knew what they were doing, but it just so coincides. And it happens sometimes.
Sure.
And it always, it's like if one TV show does this, within 6 months to 10 months, maybe a year at most, another show will do that. Stranger Things season 4 came out, and I don't want to spoil anybody in case you haven't seen it, but please go watch it. It's wonderful. But it came out in May and June, right? No, May and July of last year. And a hive mind was established with very tendril-like connections. And this kind of radar GPS thing of an entity knowing where to go in the event of must attack kind of thing. And now we have that again here in The Last of Us. And I think it's just a little bit cheap. That's all. And
Wow.
I'm not a fan of it. I'm really not.
Wow. Wait a minute.
So
hold on.
Save what you're going to say.
Okay.
Until after I talk about, and I hope that this is okay. Rob, if you're listening, if you would rather these comments not be in the show, please write in and tell me, and I'll just cut it and replace the audio. It's all good. I don't know. I know she asked him if it was okay. I don't know if he got back to her, but
all right.
So this is a bonafide, I don't know if he's a mycologist. I don't know if he's an epidemiologist, but I do know he is a scientist working with fungal specimens and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Every day of his life. This is what he does. So he watched this episode, and this is his commentary henceforth.
Okay.
Bombing is an exaggeration. So overall, the suggestion would have been a coordinated full lockdown since it didn't spread through the air. It being the CBI, the birthplace of CBI.
Yeah.
And given that Indonesia was a military dictatorship at the time, in 2003, it would have been a bit easier to isolate everyone and execute infected individuals. As scary as that sounds, there's fact number one. The flour hypothesis doesn't make sense because cakes, pancakes, cookies, etc. go through extreme heat when being cooked, and that would kill the spores. And this is very unlikely, the fungus resisted heat, it would be pointless to burn the bodies in the event of their death. So episode 1 established that burning the bodies in their death kills the infection. But episode 2 is basically saying if this is a flour-based infection, it can't really work both ways. And this is a real scientist saying this.
Okay.
And I can't refute this because I'm not a scientist.
I want to, while we're going through this, I want to just bring up 2 other points, right?
Okay, sure.
So cakes, pancakes, I mean,
cookies,
that sort of stuff. Does the infection does the flour have to be consumed, or does it just have to be touched in some way, right? If you put flour down, if you put flour in a bowl, right, to mix it, it turns into a very fine mist, right?
Like spores.
Before you even, so could just breathing that in have done it, right? It doesn't necessarily, we haven't established the parameters of it, is what
you're
I'll say.
Right. No, you're right, because but the only thing that has been established is that Mr. Adler was feeding cooked biscuits.
That's true.
To the older grandma Adler. That's what we call her, Gam Gam. And the cookies that were baked weren't eaten, and we didn't see the cookies get eaten. Yeah. The pancakes were never made, and the cookie was never consumed, or the cake was never consumed. Yeah. So I'm going off the premises that it has to be cooked and ingested.
Got it. I'm game to that. Yeah. But I totally understand that. And then that's and just for the burning of the bodies thing. I just assume that is to, I mean, again, we are to believe that burning the bodies stops stops that, right? But also it just removes a body.
And right? And literally Joel was scooping ashes up and throwing them in a trash can at the end of that sequence.
Right. So that's more, I didn't think it was burning the body stops the infection. I assume it does, but also it's we don't have room to keep these bodies. Yeah. We're not burying them. We're just going to burn them.
It's just, again, these are not my words, but it is interesting takes, and I think they're incredibly intelligent coming from a professional.
I'm excited. Let's keep running through.
Yeah. Continues on here. Fungi filaments wouldn't come out of the mouth, but it is good for cinematics.
Yeah.
And Rob believes that the filaments are kind of ridiculous overall because, yes, fungi have those little hairs, but they are microscopic. And to infect someone, the fungi would need to be and the word is levidora. I don't
Hmm.
know if I'm saying that correctly.
Okay.
There might be a little bit of a translation error because Rob speaks Portuguese. We do not. So I will look into this, I promise, and
Okay.
update on our next episode. But to go back, yeah, little hairs, but they are microscopic. And to infect someone, the fungi would need to be in the levidora, meaning it would have to be in a cellular level. So weird ass hairs sprouting from the mouth are kind of a big question mark.
Okay.
And he completely disagrees with mycelium because it would need to be in a molecular level, and fungi do not have GPS.
Unbelievable.
So even if you stepped on one, how would they necessarily know where that is? Is
It's
what
evolved.
and that could very well that argument could very well undo all of this.
Sure. I mean,
But that's a stretch. That's
it's
a
funny.
very big leap. But lastly, he said it would make more sense if someone stepped in the vines and then some sort of spores or pheromones were released, but that even then that would still be pushing it. And just to talk a little bit of the game real quick, the game's system of attracting infected by sound or an infected spotting you depending on the level of infected and then screaming, thus bringing others to the forefront along with that initial one that spotted you is
Okay.
way more believable overall. So Rob the scientist does not like the mycelium.
Rob's out. Rob,
um I
no
and
more.
yeah, stop it. Be nice. Rob, thank you so much. If you're listening, thank you so much for, basically watching and letting us know in real time your thoughts because
Yeah.
I just for the record, can my opinion change over time throughout the season? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Will my suspension of disbelief grow to kind of move past the changes that feel a little too on the nose for zombie lore and not incorporate as much science as I think they are really going for? It could. But
It could.
but right now in episode 2, I was a little disappointed overall with that. Wh All that to say,
L-
is
Uh,
it still scary? Is
uh,
it still terrifying? Absolutely.
look, here's what I'll say.
Mhm.
Infected on the ground makes total sense. That's where the growth is. Of
Yeah.
course, they would lay down to be ensconced in themselves, right?
Yeah.
And also, that's how they clearly, as we find out later on, that's how they communicate through the network that Rob doesn't believe in, right? Something comes up and crawls in their fingernail, and it's like, hey, go to the state house. And it's like, oh, okay.
But how
So
does that make sense to you?
no, I'm addressing your concern with it being too much like The Walking Dead.
Got
Like,
it.
I just feel like, of
Mhm.
course, they, given the opportunity, right?
Mhm.
I feel like this would be true of zombies also. It's a lot of energy just to stand up,
Yeah.
right? If you're a zombie, how long are you standing up? Realistically, you're burning all this energy just fighting gravity. It's so much easier just to lay down, right? And I
I'm
think these things do the same thing. They're like, hey, come on down here. The weather's the water's warm. Let's
well,
like
there's I see what you're saying, and I think, there's points to support it and there's points to kind of detract from it, and that's what I'm struggling with because if you think about mushroom species and fungi living in the world right now, they
mhm,
grow to adjust to their environment. And I mean, you can literally reach down and pick up any species, well, not every species, be careful, but any safe to handle mushroom species, and literally it will come right out of the ground like that. There is no struggle, there is no problem. So even something so light and flimsy stands straight the fuck up for its whole
sure.
life until it is picked up out of the ground. And that's where I think the game succeeded because the infected, they didn't just walk around and wait for something to happen. And they didn't just lay around and become one with the mycelium network, which is underground, by the way. It's not
Yeah, but
above
it
ground.
reaches up and touches them.
Anyway, um, the infected would just stand there like a goddamn mushroom, which makes sense because look at what CBI is based off of. It's based off of cordyceps. When you watch those videos, Nat Geo, God bless you. But when you watch those videos, it literally grows and just tries to get as high up as it possibly can to get everything beneath it. And now this show is showing us on the fucking ground. That's antithesis.
Well, so my only counter to that is also one of the main guy who gives Tess a smooch at the end, right? We see a bunch of these infected that are essentially that look like fresh, right?
Mhm.
Like they just became infected, right? But that guy, he's got all these mushrooms growing out of his head. Like he's not quite a clicker. He's still got a human face, but he's got all this extra growth. So I think that's what you're saying is like the human, what remains of the human physical form lays down, right? But the growth continues in interesting and kind of disgusting and kind of beautiful ways also. I think two things can be true.
I agree. I do agree that two things can be true. I just think if you're looking at the fucking animal kingdom as a whole,
Yeah.
this fungal parasite gets into the brain of its hosts and makes them get as high up as they possibly can. For an ant, it's on a fucking branch or a twig, whatever.
Yeah.
But for a spider, for a rodent, even this is not just limited to ants. It will make them get to a higher altitude so that it can infect everything below. And for me, seeing the infected laying down, even with the growth coming out, and this is another in-between stage, I guess, between runners and clickers.
Sure.
Interesting. It just it doesn't make sense to me just yet. And I think they're doing it more because one, they want to do things a little differently, make things a little bit more believable than just pheromones, which is what everyone just kind of assumes it is in the games.
Yeah.
But I think while the idea of nature actually coming for my ass is scary,
Sure.
it's like I'm having a hard time with this is the science as we know it. This is what we're presenting to you as fact, but we're going to tweak it to make it a little scarier. I think at the end of the day, that's what happened a little bit there.
It was also, I mean, and also visually, it was beautiful to look at. When
for sure.
When the sun passed over them, it was as if wind was blowing through tall grass, right? Like they all kind of moved at the same exact speed. It was that. So part of it is a function of what looks the best visually, right?
Yeah.
If they were all just standing there, that would certainly be very frightening, right? But then how do we convey that they're connected? If they all sway together while standing, it would probably look fine, but I'm sure they tested that and they were like, you know what would look really cool? I don't know. I'm just throwing shit out there.
No, and I love that. I like that we're not necessarily on the same page. And I hope that continues to happen because I love that with shows and games and stuff.
Tension.
No, not tension. We're just talking. I've seen comments supporting that they love these changes and it makes it more frightening. And I've seen people that are like, this isn't working quite well for me.
Okay.
So I've seen it go both ways, but I'm not like all of my complaints about Ellie notwithstanding, and now, this new network being established, it doesn't take away how I feel. And this was still, the first episode for me was a 10 out of 10. This is like a 7 out of 10 overall.
How dare.
Okay. But to kind of, we already talked about Tess but I'm just going to say it again. This is my Tess, but I'm done.
Hashtag my Tess.
My Tess.
All right, let's go to the museum.
Yeah, we're going to be in there a while.
Take a little detour to the museum. The Bostonian, I believe, is what it was called. We enter, okay? We pause. Well, we pause outside of this place. It does not look like a place that you would want to go into, right? But apparently from the roof, you can get access to very easy access to get to the state's building or whatever they're calling it.
Mhm.
Joel checks the tendrils on the ground outside, right? He like hits them with the butt of his rifle and they crunch and they like turn to ash. They're dried up and they're dead. And he says something like they're cooked. I think he says something or they're scorched or something like that, which is interesting to me. How
Cooked.
how they arrived like that, right? Well,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure we'll maybe learn about it, but so we get a little sandwich / flashlight sass between Joel and Ellie. Again, we have a nice rapport building between these two. There's a lot of back and forth, right?
Mhm.
Tess gives instructions to Ellie to follow, right? She's like,
Mhm.
here's what's going to happen when we get in there.
Yeah.
They still don't let her have a weapon. She says something along the lines of, I have an extra hand. And Joel's like, good for you. Right. It's just like I love their back and forth.
Yeah.
We get some pretty silent progression as the trio makes their way through the first floor, completely dark in this place, except for lit by flashlight, right?
Yeah.
Ellie discovers a recently dead corpse, and this thing is, I mean, like, still very much human. There's no like growth or anything, but it is like eviscerated. There's scratch marks all over. Eyes are open. Dude, there's blood everywhere, right? Ellie's like, I was attacked and it was nothing like that.
Mhm.
And Joel and Tess are trying to convince themselves that it's not what they think it is, right? They share a look and it's just like, oh boy, oh boy.
Mhm.
We get this great, I love this line. Joel, Ellie's talking in like her normal voice and Joel like, he's like, stop. And he says, from now on, we are silent, not quiet, silent. Right. And you're like, oh shit. And there's all this like it's very tense, right? The silence continues, and every step you hear, every step they take as they're making their way up the steps, higher and higher in the building. We see piles of dead infected. Ellie accidentally steps on a vine, breaks it. It's like you might as well have just like shot a gun, right? It's so loud.
It's so yeah.
Luckily, nothing happens, but they continue to move through cautiously. They enter a room, and the ceiling behind them completely collapses. It sounds like this whole building is about to fall apart, truth be told, as they make their way up.
Mm-hmm.
We hear some pretty strange sounds at this point. Clicking, shrieking, a very high-pitched tone. Joel, Tess, and Ellie move slowly, okay? They are using these museum cabinets and displays to kind of shield themselves, right? Joel signals to Ellie that these creatures, he does a really great thing. Audio listeners, I'm sorry. He kind of like points to his ears and then he points to his mouth, or vice versa. He's like, they can't see, but they can hear, right? He signals, be quiet. She closes her eyes. She tries to calm herself. She's breathing very slowly. The clicker comes around, and this is, I mean, to watch this so beautifully shot, he comes around past Joel's left, and Ellie lets out just like a breath. She's like, right?
Yeah.
And the clicker goes, wah, and whips around, and it is on, right? Joel fires like 2 or 3 shots into this thing and gets knocked the hell over. Joel yells, he's like, run, run. They separate. Tess draws the other one away because there are 2 of them. And we see Joel is holding one off with his gun. It's crazy. It's madness. I'm trying to describe it all, but it's just true chaos happening. Joel eventually slips away. He pushes a thing over. It confuses the clicker that was following him. Tess runs off. We don't see her. Ellie just kind of freezes in place.
Yeah.
This was really, really great. Joel is reloading his revolver. We hear the clicker, but then we don't really hear it. Joel peeks around the corner. The clicker is like right there, shines a flashlight right in his face. This thing is disgusting.
Oh,
but
my God.
But also kind of amazing looking.
Yes.
Right? The color, the pattern, the texture, it's incredible. But also, if you saw it, you would
Yeah.
Yeah, you would shit
That
your pants.
that would be, oh, there she is, dead.
Yeah. Uh, Joel makes his way to Ellie. He sees her flashlight, so he makes his way to her.
Mhm.
They begin to kind of creep away from the remaining clicker. Joel accidentally steps on a piece of glass. This thing's like, "Rah!" Launches itself over a display cabinet, tackles him, right?
Mhm.
There's a tussle. Joel eventually gets the upper hand, kills one. Another one comes running in. Tess hatchets it in the head, which seems to disorient and confuse it. Like it can't kind of echolocate anymore.
Mhm.
Joel gets his gun, the assault rifle this time. Bang, bang. That thing's down,
Mhm.
dead. Holy shit balls, right?
Yes. Holy shit. Yeah.
Tess has a twisted ankle,
Mhm.
right? But otherwise, Joel's fine. Ellie was bit again. Actually, if it weren't for Ellie, Joel maybe would have been bit.
Yeah.
Right? Her arm just kind of happens to be in the spot where the clicker was like going for.
Yeah.
And so if you're familiar with me from our other podcast, Wayfaring Strangers, I'll just say arm guards really would have helped a lot in this scenario for everybody. That's all I'm going to say. That's
Not
all I'm going to
Tess.
say.
Not Tess.
Well. All right. They eventually get out on the roof of the museum. Joel is helping Tess tape her ankle, electrical tape. I mean,
Yeah.
it is essentially like whatever we can find, right?
Yeah.
I really like that aspect of it.
Mhm.
Joel says, "Now I know that, he's like, we're going to go across this thing. It's a ladder with boards on it." He's like, "We're going to go across this thing. I know it looks scary." She's like, "It's wood. That was scary." Walks right across. It was such a great moment. Tess gives Joel a look, and Jackie in her notes here has trademark after look. Joel is still doubtful and suspects that the second bite that Ellie got, right? We see just a little like blood. You might be it, right? But Tess says, stop, just believe in this, will you? She orders Joel to just leave her alone, go watch Ellie. She'll finish taping up her ankle. Tess appears to lament. It's not relief that she's experiencing. They're clear of the museum, but everyone else has let out a sigh of relief, not Tess, right? Yeah. Joel and Ellie have a moment when they get across this thing. They're looking out on the roof. The Golden Roof State House is in the distance, right? There's a great line that we'll probably talk about that's exchanged between them about the view. Joel peeks at his watch after signaling Ellie to follow Tess down the ladder. Tess comes by. She is on a mission. She walks right by, does not take in the view. She's like, "We got to move. Let's get there."
Yeah.
It's a lot. She is a
lot.
woman possessed at this point.
And I do remember thinking the first time I played it, I was like, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And one thing we talk a lot on Wayfarin Strangers, one thing we joke a lot about is if any of us were ever in this scenario, like, we're not fucking telling anyone we're infected until like the last possible second.
It's classic. It's Zombies 101.
Yeah.
Look at everything that's ever existed with a zombie. No one says shit.
Yeah. And
they're like, it won't happen to me, right?
And then it does.
It's actually the human condition. Truly. That is what a zombie tale truly is about, the human condition, where you just go about your life saying it won't happen to me. Or it can't. Or you just, and it's awesome. It's really, really great.
I agree. And I think that also was done really well. And going back to where you're like, Jack's note said, Tess gives Joel a look, trademark. She was looking at him as he was not looking at her. And it was just the most somber, like, I just want to look at this man for as long as I can because I know what's going to happen. And it was heartbreaking. And I'm getting upset. Anna Torv did just, it says we have Tess for 5 episodes. And whatever capacity Tess is in, whether it's flashbacks, quick throwback, whatever, maybe Joel has a nightmare. I don't know. But like, I am so looking forward to seeing more of what Marlene was the standout in episode 1. Tess was the standout in episode 2.
Yeah.
There's just something so simple about what she brought to the character, but so fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
And it overwhelmed me, and I cried so like, of course I cried at Tessa's death in the game. I was in tears at what happened in this episode.
Yeah.
It definitely hit harder. Uh,
Based sorry, I just wanted to add, based on what we learn
mhm,
later in just a really quick piece of dialogue that she throws away, and I'm sure you'll touch on it. eh, That look, what I thought you meant by the look is
mhm.
like she's looking at this person who is taking care of her,
Yeah.
but also didn't is it isn't what she needs him to be, but it's also like, I love you.
Mhm.
Like that's kind of how took that.
Oh, I'm with you.
Reinforce
Yeah.
like certainly reinforced by the line later on, but like,
Mhm.
you know, Joel is like, just cross the ladder, kid, and just really focused on the task at hand. Like, I want to make sure that Tess is okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
He cares deeply for her,
Mhm.
but not in necessarily the way that she cares about him,
Yeah.
I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that shortly. Just a couple notes. So the tension was absolutely like, oh, the tension cup runneth over
Yeah. They
with
did a
this.
fantastic job here. It
Yes.
was,
I mean, the clicker introduction compounded with the silence leading up to it.
Mhm.
We know what they sound like, but even having it delivered to us again but in a much different medium. Oh, I was like, "Oh, it makes me think that every time on Wayfarin Strangers when I say I'm gonna fucking survive, I would not." Like,
Once
that's
you see what they're capable of, you're like, oh
yes.
my God.
No, truly feel like I would have frozen multiple times and just been like, "I can't fucking believe this is real." And I'm looking and it's coming to eat me. Like, because I feel like the early stages of the infected are more the let's spread infection.
Yeah.
Clickers are the I've been spread, I'm fucking killing you. And
Yeah.
that's what I was they made some adjustments where they could to make it all practical effects.
Yeah.
And I genuinely do not think it could have been done any better than what we saw in that show. My brain felt I was like, "Oh, well, it's kind of like this head and then human jaw." Whereas in the game, it's like a little bit like maybe a human chin because they have to
Y-
open their mouth and scream. But
Yeah.
then the infection starts really early and kind of flowers outward. So that was
Mhm.
an adjustment, but I think they had to do that because these are real people that they're working with.
Yeah.
So,
I'm loving the fact of I wrote in my I'll share it after the show. I shared it with you briefly. My very unhinged way of taking notes while I watch this show,
yeah.
and just one of them was like practical greater than CG. Like just the fact that that thing look like it
Mhm.
looks. I want to touch it, right?
I
And
don't.
that, I mean, just like
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen like a painting, like a masterful painting with like thick brush strokes, and like you're like, I shouldn't touch that. I really want to touch it though, right? That's the same thing. Like when I look at that, I'm like, oh, what does that feel like, right? Like,
Gross.
and I very rarely. I might be talking out of my ass. Sometimes it's true. Like a dragon on Game of Thrones, right? They nail what the dragon skin looks like, and so when I see a dragon, I'm like, I want to touch that, right?
Yes.
But it's the same here, but it's done practically. It's so, I think the actors get to react to it in a
Mhm.
way that is more, we are there with them
Yeah.
than a CG dragon that's not like that's just a tennis ball to the people on set at Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
Whereas that clicker is like in the room with Pedro. Like that's a guy in makeup. I would
Yeah.
love to see behind the scenes of him just talking like, so what are you doing on Saturday?
Yeah. Now let's grab a beer, man. Yeah.
Like I just, but yeah,
Yeah.
all that is to say, love the practical effects they're doing here. So good.
And you know what I especially really enjoyed about the practical and I don't wanna be that person, like, my preference still again, virtual photography with video games, I still prefer video game clicker because I think there's just something um that can't be achieved with real living people who aren't dying of a horrifying infection. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But it doesn't detract at all. And I've said that now like 3 times and people are going to be like, "Jack, just say you don't like it." No, I do like it. I just it's tough for me to separate still. I think
You
it's
can have
still
a
early in the
preference.
game.
You
Yeah.
could like both, but have a preference for one,
There you go. Done. That's what it is. And but what I loved, what I oh, Andrew, I was like, this is such a oh, I just got bad chills. I love it so much. But the colors were
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
So, like, one kind of had, like, tinged orange on its
Mhm.
fungal plates, and then the other one was literally, like, chromatic.
Yeah.
Just all color leached from the fungal plates, and I was like, "That is fucking scary." Their tongues are black, like, their teeth are it was horrifying, and I was like, the choice to give them different colors, different textures, different even their arms having, like, little tiny pieces of fungi growing out of it,
Yeah.
you know, that's, again, from the game and stuff, but it was j oh, I still have chills because it freaked me out. I was like,
Yeah.
because you would be able to be in that situation, not that we any of us wanna be in that situation, but you could be in that situation and be like, "That's the clicker that I just ran away from. That's a fucking totally different one."
Yeah.
And then but that
That's
could
Bob.
also yeah, and that's Bobby.
Man. Yeah.
So, like but yeah, I just I found that really interesting because it could also help you, if it was even possible in that moment, to ground your thought process enough to be like, "Oh, I killed that one already. Oh, I didn't kill that one already." Like, I don't know if you need to just fight your way to that level through
Right.
years of fighting infected, but yeah,
We'll
there were
see.
only 2 infected in there and or 2 clickers in there, and they were they were some fearsome creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. It really that it does a great job of establishing stakes for these things
Yes.
too, because Joel gets like 3 or 4 body shots on the initial one, and
Mhm.
it does not stop. It's
Mm.
like no.
No.
It's not until we get the headshots and literal pieces of the thing break off that you're like,
Yeah.
I think it's okay to like have a breath now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which make me this is not on the notes, but now I'm curious to get your opinion on this. And I weirdly enough, never thought about it until I saw it done in a practical sense. We know what mushroom textures feel like,
Yeah.
and they're very easy to destroy.
Sure.
So when it comes to clickers and beyond, and that's all I'll say there, clickers, what do you think? Like, do you think it's a literal extension of human bone? Like, literally growing with fungus? Or do you just think the bones split and then this fungus grows around and under and outside of it?
The
Because
second one.
eh, because then wouldn't it be weak?
It is, I think, because Tess buries a hatchet right in the side of one's head. I mean, you
Mhm.
could bury a hatchet in the side of a human head,
Yeah,
I imagine. I've never done it.
let's not.
But and but she's like, "Wha," just boom, right out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah. So I imagine it's like everything else. It's just breaking through. It would
Mhm.
be the equivalent of like uh, growing between cobblestone streets. You know what?
Mm.
That's like how I kind of imagine it. Right? As
Okay.
disgusting as that sounds. All
I
right.
know,
Your skull being the cobblestone street in this case.
horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, I was just curious because I never really thought about, like, what it like, if you grabbed onto 2 plates, like, the 2 foremost plates of a clicker, could you just rip them off? Or would it be
Probably.
like horns, like almost like an antler type thing
So
texture?
that's a question for Neil Druckmann, I think.
I
There.
know. Neil, Craig, hello, hi. And just side note, I have not had the chance because of traveling and a million hours in a car. I have not had a chance to listen to the official podcast episode 2 yet, but I will tomorrow.
Do they take? Well, that's probably already recorded, but it would be interesting to see if they maybe take questions. Maybe they record a bonus episode where we write in.
Maybe, because I would love that.
All right, we'll see. We'll see how
Yeah.
it goes.
Uh, okay, so next thing, Stranger Things. I told you I was gonna talk about it again. There's more Stranger Things 4 vibes here as the group ascended the staircase, sidestepping tendrils and vines and stuff. And I will leave it at that. But again, even though it was super suspenseful and
Mm,
tense as fuck, and the music, the silence, it was all very just. I mean, it was executed perfectly. But we had seen that already in a different show, so I was like, "Oh, this could have been scarier a year ago." Like, so that's all. And I know I have a comparison problem, and I wish I could live in the fucking moment too, okay? But, yes, we already talked about the sound design, like the creaks, the clicking, the breathing, the rustling of clothes, Ellie's tiny little breath that set it off. The immersion
yeah.
for viewers of this show is insane, and they are, like, 10 out of 10 for both episodes with just putting us in the shit.
Yeah.
So,
One thing I'll say is just reminiscent again. The game had the uh, qui- quiet parts and enemies that were triggered by sound, and we've seen that happen in movies
mhm.
as and other mediums, potentially to greater or lesser degrees. I'll just give a shout out to like the film A Quiet Place, which had a very
Yes.
similar execution of like something that utilized silence in a scary way.
Mhm,
It similar but not the same. But I
mhm,
just wanted to call that out because I thought about that while I was watching. I was like, "Ooh, this is like that same,
mhm.
same thing, same thing."
Yeah, and again, I'm not being like, "Oh, Stranger Things did it first, so Last of Us can't do it." Every creative property in one way or another borrows, enhances, elevates, or enriches one another.
It's all Shakespeare, you know.
It truly is, and I don't know what the fuck that means, but I'm gonna agree with it anyway. But, yeah, I just don't wanna be that guy, but that's what we do on this show.
You be that guy.
I will be that guy on this show because I don't, you know me, I don't love just, like, blindly, salivating over something if I have,
That's my job.
something to critically, like, some criticism that isn't detracting. I'm not saying like, "Oh, they fucked it up. Oh, this is stupid," and then not giving a reason. I will never do that,
Yeah.
ever. That's not who I am. But, yeah. So, moving forward to the last bit of the episode. So, we are outside, and then we, eventually get into the state house. But Tess is leading the charge here, and she is not speaking to either Joel or Ellie. And, they're kind of walking down this street, and I think Joel is picking up for sure on the tension without doing anything about it.
Mhm.
And, I don't know, in my mind, I always just thought well, tonight I'll talk to her, like, whatever. Not really suspecting one way or the other, even though he's been in this world and knows exactly what can happen.
Yeah.
And forgetting that they were separated at the museum for a bit. But they arrive to the state house and no one appears to be there. There's no fireflies. There's just this box truck sitting out front by the steps. And Joel approaches it, tells them to stay behind, and he finds it completely bloody and just it's all wrong in the cab of the truck. And
Yeah.
then turns and sees a corpse on the ground that is already it's already got some flies buzzing around. So something happened
Yeah.
and it's been a minute. So, they pick up on the blood trail that leads inside, and Tess races in, her gun pointed straight ahead, and she is dragging Ellie.
Yeah.
And there is no mistaking that this urgency is bad news. It
Mhm.
spells bad news. And we get inside, and everyone is dead. However, we learned here that Fedra was not responsible, which was different. That was a deviation. But there's one Joel surmises that there was one infected, and it ended up being the healthy fighting the sick, and everyone lost.
Yeah.
Tess continues with her urgency as she tries to figure out what the next step is, asking Ellie, checking the bodies, trying to find a map, trying to find a plan. But there is no going home for Tess, she says, and kind of barks at Joel a little bit. And this is
Mhm.
when Ellie realizes that Tess is infected. And Tess, you know, sh- Joel asks her, like, show me.
Yeah.
And I thought he was gonna do the same thing that that was done in the game. He was like, "Show it to me." Like, it was like the emphasis on the words, but he was just like, "Show me," and it's fine. But we see that she was bit not quite on her neck, but not too far from her neck. And going back to episode 1, we know if you're bit on the neck or the head, 5 to 15 minutes. If you're bit on your torso or your arms, 2 to 6 hours, or your feet, 12 to 24. So I'm assuming she was in the range of the torso of
Yeah.
2 to 8 hours, even though it was super fucking close to her neck.
Right.
Maybe she was like an hour and a half-ish.
Let's
She
split the I say let's
Yeah.
split the difference because the bite looked pretty rough when she
Yeah.
showed it. It was already like, yeah.
Spreading, yeah. So, after this moment is exchanged, Tess goes over to Ellie and whips off her bandage. Or I can't did Ellie whip off her bandage? I think
She
Ellie
told
took her
her, she's
bandage
like,
off.
take
Yeah.
take your bandage off.
Take your
Yeah.
bandage off, and then she goes over and she's like, "This is the real deal." Like, she is fucking real, and that's a kind of an amalgamation of what was used in the game and what was new in the show, and I really like that. We'll talk about it shortly. And she implores Joel to see this through.
Mhm.
Get Ellie to Bill and Frank. Get them, convince them. Like, she's imploring him to not let this go to waste. And her emotions are raw. Her heart is bare, even for a few, not even a full minute. Just basically, I never expected you to feel for me what I felt for you, which is what I always said in the game. I'm like, I fully believe that Tess was in love with him, but I don't
Yeah.
think it was reciprocated.
Yeah.
And this fully brought that to the light.
That
And
was
I'm
the
sorry
line.
for all y'all Tess and Joel shippers who wanted them to be just like star-crossed lovers and soulmates. No. It was heartbreaking, and it was the reality of their life and what she settled for and accepted because that's all he could give.
Mhm.
And he is just, I mean, he doesn't really, what can he say in this moment? What can he do in this moment? He's just listening to her and, you know, save who you can save. Like,
Yeah.
it's just this begging, this save who you can save. And right now that's Ellie. That's who he needs to save, because you can't save me anymore.
Yeah.
And it's
The urgency in her voice,
Mhm.
like he starts to talk back and she's like, shut the fuck. I don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And we see like she held out her hand and it was like shaking, like twitching. Like
Yeah.
I'm sure that she feels in this moment, like
Mhm.
this is taking over. Like,
It's
I
already
don't know if
happening.
you know, I don't know if you as an infected person can physically feel it or not, but I
Mhm.
have to imagine in this moment, she was like, it's like, it is happening to me. Don't
Mhm.
fucking argue with me. It was
Yeah.
so good.
It was, and it was just so heartbreaking. And it was heartbreaking in the show. Or in the game, it was worse in the show
Yeah.
by, I mean, leaps and bounds. Um and then all of a sudden, an infected that was presumed to be dead
Mhm.
comes back, tries to attack. Joel shoots it in the head and ends it. However, we see the mycelium reach up through the fingers of the infected he just kills, and then it flashes back to the horde that we saw earlier,
Yes.
and those same tendrils are reaching up and awakening them and guiding them to the state house, which again,
Hey,
it's fine. I mean, we're not using
it's
GPS.
better
Like,
than fine.
it's it's good. There you go. It's good. It's not great. That's all you get from me. So the horde begins to race to the state house. There's T-1 until they're well and truly fucked. Tess begins to spill barrels of gas and tosses grenades on the ground, just like haphazardly, like, bitch. And we see that this is the plan. Joel and Tess say their last goodbye, and Joel doesn't say anything. He just stares at her, but the emotion on his face, his throat is bobbing, his lips are quivering. Like, this is whatever heart he has left, it's breaking it,
Yeah.
and he's losing someone else. And I saw someone say that they were like, Joel desperately is like, all we see is desperation not to lose someone else he loves. Because he does, of course, love her to some capacity.
Of
It's just
course.
not the same.
Yeah.
And Tess knew that, and it was enough for her. And I respect the fuck out of her. But Joel drags Ellie, like grabs this kid by the arm and just drags her away from Tess to the point of where he's literally like her feet are sliding on the floor and he's just
Yeah.
yanking her as she's fighting him to not leave Tess.
Yeah.
And then this whole sequence just happens. Tess begins to struggle with the lighter and all of the horde just comes racing in, and then they start to slow down because they've reached the target. Like the one that was on the ground, that's what they wanted to get to. That's the GPS radar that they needed to hit, and they're there.
Yeah.
And now Tess is struggling and this lighter is not lighting. Side note, why the fuck didn't she just pull out her gun and just shoot the fucking gasoline or a grenade? But anyway, so she's struggling, and an infected takes notice of her. And like we said, it's not a runner and it's not a clicker. It's somewhere in between, which is, oh God,
A
horrifying.
lot of growth, but not what we just experienced.
Yeah.
Still has kind of a face left.
And can see her.
Yes, it looks right at her.
Yes. And he walks slowly to her as she's still trying to click this lighter over. And she does not move. She does not protest. She does not stop. But he kisses her. Like the fungi, the mycelium in his mouth comes out and enters her mouth. And she's disgusted. But it's a kiss of death is what it is.
Yeah.
And then finally, this look of absolute horror, it focuses on her eyeball. And she looks down and finally lights the lighter. And bombs go boom. Gas goes boom. And all the infected inside scream and die.
Yeah.
And of course, she dies. Joel and Ellie are outside by this point. Joel is poised with the assault rifle, waiting for any stragglers, but none come. Joel turns away and just walks in silence. And Ellie just turns and watches him walk away in absolute silence. And that is where the episode ends. So we'll get to the kiss of death shortly. But quick couple notes just to get them out of the way. So I don't know if you picked up on this, and I certainly didn't until I went onto social media. Naughty Dog posted this. But Tess's lighter had number 76 and the star on it, which was Sam Drake's lighter from Uncharted 4.
I did not.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Pretty freaking cool.
That is pretty cool.
The Uncharted series is also another 4-game series done by Naughty Dog, who, of course, makes The Last of Us, if anyone is interested.
There was a movie that was okay.
It was all right. I just, Mark Wahlberg, why? But, and Naughty Dog actually made a replica of the one on the show and gave it to Troy Baker, because Troy Baker, who plays Joel in the Last of Us series, portrayed Sam Drake in Uncharted 4. So all the things coming together.
Synergy.
So, yeah.
Synergy. It brings us all together.
It truly does. So we knew Tess was a goner from the gameplay, all of us who have played and experienced it. However, it was evident even in this that she was hiding something. Like her disposition changed after the museum and was way more just severe. I think that's the right word to use for her disposition. And I think Anna Torv, just from start to finish, that transition to go from, I don't need to believe that this kid is what they say she is, I just want to get the fucking payout, to save who you can save, this is fucking real. It was like a seamless transition and portrayal of a person that went from disbelief to utter and sheer belief. And give me another example of where this has been done as expertly. I'll fucking wait. Because you're not going to find it.
I believe. Yeah. It was really, really beautiful. Yes.
And a side note, side personal note. I mean, they're all, I guess, personal notes, I guess. But she's fucking real.
Yeah.
They changed the line from "this is fucking real, Joel" in the game to "she's fucking real," and that, I'm gonna get upset. That was so pivotal. Knowing what becomes of Joel and Ellie's journey. and knowing how Joel lost his daughter, and now he is on this journey with a girl similar to his daughter's age.
Sure.
And saying she's fucking real makes that all the more real for him too. And it was just beautiful. That's all. I'm done.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah.
Again, powerhouse performance
Yes.
is really what it comes down to. Anna Torv, the goat of this episode,
truly.
100%. And really, I think between just like what we have seen so far between the first episode and the second episode really sets the table for new fans to the series of like,
Yes.
nothing is off limits, right? Like, I
Mhm.
remember, again, very brief aside, people getting upset at the 9th episode of Game of Thrones when a major character who we love is killed, and you're like,
Mm.
how are they even going to do a show without this guy, right? And then,
Yeah.
like, in the
And they
first
did.
episode, we lose we lose Sarah, and it is devastating. And in the second episode, we lost Tess, and it is
Yeah.
devastating. It is unrelenting.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, they put their foot on the gas and it's not gonna come off, people.
yeah.
So don't
I
expect
just
any kind of, like, lull.
right. It's yeah. It's
Yeah.
something special. But also not I feel like everybody who we met and have lost so far has
Mm.
been given the time for us to get to know them, to get to love them. It doesn't feel cheap in any way.
I agree.
What took Game of Thrones 9 episodes to do.
Mhm.
One episode, well, 2 for Tess, but 1 for Sarah.
Sarah. Not even 1. 30
28
minutes.
Yeah. And that is remarkable
Mhm.
to go from meeting, learning, loving, losing, right? Like that
Yeah.
is, we went through an entire life in such a short, an abridged period of time. It's
Yeah.
great. It's
It
great.
is. I completely agree with you. I think that there's something extraordinary happening on this show, and
Yeah.
that both excites me and horrifies me. And that's all I'm
What
gonna
will
say.
they do next?
Yeah.
No!
Don't want to say a damn thing. So, Joel's goodbye. We were talking about micro expressions
Sure.
portrayed by Pedro, and the lack thereof with the burning body sequence, the burning of the child sequence
Yeah.
specifically. There was way more of an emotional response to this death for sure.
Of course.
Uh, and I think that allows us to latch on to his character,
Mhm.
because if we see him, he loses his daughter and he has this great moment of, Pedro exhibits this great moment of loss and instant overwhelming grief
Yeah.
and shattered. His life is shattered. And then we're 20 years in the future and he doesn't care that he has to throw this child into a fire. So we see how much he's changed. But now he's losing someone that he spent presumably years alongside
Yeah.
and loves to an extent, and he reacts to that. So if he had been a cold, unfeeling fuck with Tessa's death, I
Mhm.
think it would be really hard for people to kind of feel for him or identify with him. So they're balancing how Joel moves and lives and survives in this world after Sarah's death, but still having his heart open just enough.
Yeah. He's
So,
pushing it down,
yes.
right?
Mhm.
He's suppressing to the best of his ability, but it's one of those things where it's like barely contained,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And that is, it makes you really wonder what's going on underneath that Mandalorian mask, like what more could we have gotten from that character had the
Yeah.
mask been off? But yeah, he's expert at this.
Mhm.
He certainly understood what,
The assignment.
yeah, what Tess meant to Joel. They have a rich backstory, at
Mhm.
least in their minds. Even at least those two actors probably have constructed some backstory for the two of them if they weren't outright told one. And also, he is understanding what Tess means to us and reflecting us to ourselves in a way, like seeing that through his eyes as our protagonist, one of our protagonists. That's when you really start to, you're like, no, not today.
Yeah.
You know, you start to
but
get,
it is today.
God damn it. It's 2 episodes. So you just start you're like yelling at your television. Why? Why would you do this to me?
Yeah.
So I knew it was coming. I knew it, just like Sarah. I knew it was coming.
And it still hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And last note before we get to our TV game spoiler section, which is always going to be, again, a quick little run through.
Yeah.
But The Last of Us Part 2, which again, Gustavo Santaolalla also scored that. He scored he did the soundtrack.
Correct.
And he did Part 1, Part 2, and now he's doing the show. And Allowed to Be Happy from Part 2 is the song that plays the show out. And that is, we can't talk a lot about that because of the non-spoiler section of looking ahead and what the significance of that song is. But I just want people who are with us on this journey, who are new to the franchise, to know that that song has such weight and gravity to it that will be realized in the future.
Okay.
And that's where we have to leave it.
That's what we'll say.
Yeah.
Are we gonna talk about the kiss?
We are gonna talk about the kiss. I was just trying to forget it happened, but
look, let me start the opening volley here.
I certainly have a theory as to why it happened.
I loved it insofar as you can love such a disgusting thing. Okay? Hear me out. When the infected arrive, this is all theoretical now. We're in the town, we're in the theory town, because this doesn't actually really happen at all in the game. So let me just put that out there. They come bursting in the door, and several of them just run right by Tess. Like she's not even there, right?
Yeah.
It's like they don't care, which leads me to believe that in some capacity, they have already she's already they just realize. It's like how zombies don't bite other zombies, right? Oh, you're one of us, right?
Yeah.
Except that one who beelines for her. And
he walks slowly.
He does, but
yeah.
So it's a twofold thing. One, she is not fighting this, right? She doesn't pull out a gun and start shooting, which I think would have changed the dynamic. Okay. I think there is a sense. I don't know what the level of intelligence of a mycelium creature is, but I believe it to be the intelligence at its base level of a want, right? Insofar as it wants to connect.
Wants to spread.
Insofar as any organism that exists has the directive of spreading and connecting with other organisms of its type.
Yeah.
And so it's not it's a kiss because it's like mouth to mouth, but it's not a kiss. It's actually like a dark. It's something that we wanted Joel and Tess to have. It is like that, but they twisted it and they made it dark. It's a beautiful thing that they have twisted. And I was like, it is so disturbing. It is such a violation.
Yes.
But again, we have to just divorcing it from the fact that this creature, this thing that walks up to her, has, in my estimation, a very low intelligence beyond the prime directive, let's call it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is like such an interesting disgusting. Like,
choice.
I felt so conflicted by it, and I think that's what they wanted us to feel.
Mhm.
And that, I think that's the mark of something like a good idea is
Mhm.
one that we're like, I don't really know. I'm all over the place with this. Ultimately, I come down on the side of it was very effective.
Mhm.
And that's what I like about it. It was memorable. When you went on Twitter, and I know you did, after that, you went on Twitter right after that because I saw you.
Yeah.
That's what everyone was talking about.
Mhm.
And so like I was like, well, if the goal was to generate an idea and buzz, mission accomplished.
Yes, and I was like, "We have lots of thoughts to talk about the Cordy makeout sesh." Like,
Yes.
and of course I know it's not a kiss.
Yeah.
And I feel better about it after hearing your thoughts, so I'm glad you went first. But I mean, as good as I can feel about that, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's terrible,
it's
but
terrible
beautiful and terrible. It's that. It's a
because
it's a train wreck. That's what it is.
and that's what I said when it happened. I like looked to Gab and I was like, "Huh!" I was like, "I just wanted Joel to kiss her." Like,
Yeah.
what is this? This is so foul and unnecessary. Like, that's what I kept feeling. I was like, he could have just put the mycelium in her fucking ear. That's what she said. But like, it was just,
Wait,
it was
what?
so, it was so over the top that I was like, I was like, my stomach is upset. Like, but you're right. It was effective and it perverted something that we wanted to see have happen. And now we might see Joel and Tess kiss in a future episode because she's supposed to be there 3 more times at some point over 3 more
Yeah.
episodes. And who knows? All I know is my brain, which is not infected with mycelium, basically said she didn't resist it because that recognition had already happened in her. So even though she was horrified and aware that I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, just flick the lighter. It was, I can't do anything about this. Like
Yeah.
I'm being overrun already to the point of where I can't even avoid this fucking creature putting its in my mouth.
Yeah.
And that is truly next level nasty. And that's all I'm
Yeah.
going to say. So,
That's I'm not the first person. I'm clearly not the first person to have thought about this or considered the similarities with Alien or Geiger, just
oh,
in
that was all
Geiger's.
over Twitter too.
Yeah. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that again, it's an act. It is like a violation.
Mhm.
Um, and I recognize that, but if we're taking the source material at its word, as we discussed that we should in the very
Yeah.
beginning,
Mhm.
these things that they are effectively plants that walk, and they look a
And
little bit
kill.
like us. They look a little bit like us, but they're
Yeah.
not us. That it's
Mhm.
whatever was, and even in this episode, knowing that they used to be people, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So that is kind of how that's the bucket that I put this in. And
Mhm.
it was I've watched it twice. I watched the episode twice all the way through in preparation for our show. It was just like, oh,
Yeah.
like it's just the eyes of both of them just wide open the entire time is
Mhm.
also a very disturbing thing to
Yeah.
see, because I don't know if runners and clickers don't even, but I don't know if they blink. Like, I don't know if an affected person even has to blink, right? Is
Yeah.
that a thing? But he didn't, and that was weird. So yeah.
Wow. And he was, I don't know if you picked up on this, but so when the mycelium triggered the horde, he
Yeah.
was the one that stood up. Like
Yeah, he was.
he was the
Yeah.
one that, yeah. So there was, again, just consistency is off the is off the charts,
It's
but
great. It's great.
yeah, I didn't mean to blow by the kiss of death. I'm sorry if everyone was like, "Wait, Jack!" But
Someone was going to call us out if we didn't talk about it. So
for sure.
I just wanted to address it, get our thoughts on it. You know, win, lose, or draw.
Mhm.
At least we come down. We at least have ideas and opinions on it.
For sure. And now, quick little game to TV show spoilers section. So, if you guys want to just kind of speed ahead, like 5 minutes roughly, so because you don't care or you eventually want to play the game, whatever you want, we're just going to kind of run through a really quick list. So,
Sure.
number one, Tessa's comment, Joel and I aren't good people, came out of place. She said that initially when she was about to die. That was at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah.
So, different placement, still as effective, which is interesting.
Mhm.
Ellie's, fuck you, man. I didn't ask for this. Again, came at a different time, but Ellie still delivered it the way that was delivered in the game to, I think, a level of effectiveness that still worked for me.
Yeah.
The heavy cabinet barring the door that Joel slid over from the building they were sleeping in, and then they exited through. That is classic Last of Us game shit, where
Yeah.
they push stuff in front of the door multiple times. So I love seeing that. Ellie lying about Riley's absence at the mall with her infection story, I found interesting. So whether that was to protect Riley's memory or keep something just for herself, either way,
Mhm.
interesting.
Yep.
Ellie answering Tess about whether or not a boyfriend would have come after her, and thus Joel and Tess, lends an early look into Ellie's character and her sexual orientation.
Mhm.
Because canonically, Ellie is a lesbian. And we didn't know that in game one. We had some hints of it. Not hints of it. The fuck am I? We knew in Left Behind. And then in part two, it's fully realized with
Sure.
journal entries and then an actual visual relationship, which is beautiful until it falls apart. But I liked the way that Bella Ramsey portrayed that when she was like, "Well, I'm an orphan and no," about a boyfriend. Yeah.
Ah!
Yeah, like I got you. So a hint to bloaters. I couldn't talk about this earlier, of course, but Ellie's, so there aren't super infected that explode fungus spores on you. 100% that is a bloater. They rip off things and throw them at you and they
Yeah.
explode.
And it's bleh,
It's awful.
gross.
It's awful. And so the hotel scene, including Tess, was different. Originally in the game, it is just Joel and Ellie at the hotel, and
Mhm.
Tess doesn't make it past the museum. She gets infected in the museum, and then, or she does make it past the museum. She goes to the state house, dumbass. But they don't like sleep anywhere. They just walk through the night,
Mhm.
make it to the museum. She gets infected. They go to the state house. She dies, and they fight. She's fighting off Fedra, and so the military and does not blow herself up. She gets gunned down. So
Yeah.
there it was an interesting choice to kind of undo the whole slanted building with Joel, Tess, and Ellie and just
Yeah.
go basically uh uh, um, you know, place they slept, then museum, then state house, death.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
let me just add on to this while you're here. The and this might actually lend a little bit to why this is your test, is like her death in this one
Mhm.
is so much better.
A
Like,
thousand times better.
and the fact that we see it, it actually does happen off screen
Mhm.
in the game. It's not a thing it is inferred what actually happens. You hear it, but you
Yeah.
don't actually see it. And in this, at least she had agency in the game. Don't get
Yes.
me wrong.
Mhm.
But in this one, she had made the choice and committed to it
Mhm.
with us, with Joel, with Ellie there,
Yeah.
and sees it through,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the death was so much more fulfilling
Mhm.
in this one. It felt like a fully realized decision, and Yeah, I just liked it a lot more.
I agree. I mean, because literally in the game, it's off screen. You hear a couple gunshot pops, and then and then that's it. And then you kind of have to make your way back towards that, but on a higher level. And if
Yeah,
you look down, you see just Tess lying in a pool of blood, and that's it. And
yeah.
then and Tess is gone. I I th- I think what they're doing in this is making Tess more important than the game
Mhm.
because they have the time to do so. I think that's really what it comes down to.
And they have Anna Torv,
And they
so
have
why
Anna
wouldn't
fucking
you?
Torv, yeah. So, I'm glad that they honored Tess with the death that she gave herself.
Yeah.
So, and speaking of Tess, so Joel boosting Tess up.
Yeah.
100% video game-ish shit.
It's like one of the first things you do in the game.
Yes, it
Like,
is. With
yeah.
Tess. Mhm. And Ellie with the white bandage wrapped around her forearm. That was a nice nod to, when you're injured in the game, you just whip out that bandage, wrap it around your arm. Even if your fucking foot's hanging off, you wrap that bandage around your arm and you are better.
Yeah, you're wrapping a bandage, but it sounds like duct tape. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, what the fuck is happening
It's great.
here?
It's great. Video game ass shit. But the is it everything you hoped for moment. I told you we're gonna come back to this, and now here we are. That is the start of remember. So on Wayfarin, I talk about Joel showing his care, and not necessarily for Ellie every time, but just in general. And
About the
this moment,
large,
what?
the world at large.
The world at large and the past that he has not properly coped with at all ever. And, he peeks down at his watch, which side note, I put on Twitter, I was like, it looks like his watch isn't broken in that scene, which is weird because it was broken in Sarah's death. And then later on in 20 years, when he's like drinking and doing, popping pills in the apartment, his watch is broken in those two spots. But I zoomed in and that shit didn't look broken. So it could have been a prop thing, but whatever. Um,
Mm.
it was still a beautiful moment. I still prefer the game. I think the game's is better. And the look, like Joel's look down to his watch was more subtle in the game because his arms were crossed and he just kind of makes it look like a quick just down and then up. And then, Tess kind of barks at him in the game and they get going. In the show, it's a little bit more on the nose of he's holding the strap to his assault rifle and then like not that egregious,
Oh, I
but
got this watch.
yeah,
Where'd this
from
come? Where'd this come from? No,
the
I thought it was nice. It was obvious, but I think for
Mhm.
watchers, there's
They have to
everything that,
start connecting.
but also everything they do. Like, this is a show that isn't afraid to do a subtle thing, like a look or a gesture or that. So
Yeah.
I just feel like they're prioritizing, like, if something is going to come up later and we need to make sure that it's seen, they make sure
Yeah.
that it's seen. And then the
Yeah.
other stuff, that's all gravy. Like that, like some of the looks and the glances and the way his lip quivers and all this stuff, like that's all just like tiny stuff that adds
Mhm.
up to a lot if you're really, really paying attention.
Yeah. And it's wonderful. So,
Yeah.
but that is, there were some other small minor things like lines of dialogue, not necessarily in the same locations or stuff like that. But
Yeah.
those were the big ones for me that happened in the game. So they really are incorporating a whole lot
Phew.
in a very different way.
Phew.
But that is the end of the episode.
You did it.
And yeah, I don't want to do the what are we anticipating in future episodes, so we're going to cut that section from our show as well because I think that can get a little too spoilery for people who again are just not aware.
Of course.
So I'd rather play it safe. So I forgot to write an outro.
That's okay. I'll take over from here. Listen, if you've got this far, my
No,
clock.
no,
Just give me a second here. Just give me a second here. Just give me a second. If you've gotten this far into the episode, 2 hours and 30 minutes by my clock, it might be a little bit less after we trim some stuff down, but we're well over 2 hours. I'd implore you to just head over to iTunes or Spotify or Amazon or Google or wherever. Give us a review, give us a rating. Just hit that 5-star button. You don't have to write anything at all. Smash 5 stars, right? And then go about your day. It would make ours. It would make ours if you took a minute and did that. And if you go ahead and write something like some of our reviewers did in the beginning, we'll read it. You know? That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. It's a wonderful thing to wake up in the morning and read a review and be delighted by what you see. So please, it would mean the world.
So, all right. A little contact info after Andrew's call to arms. And thank you to those who have rated and reviewed us. We are just so appreciative of you and everyone who have downloaded this show. Our numbers exploded. I've never seen it like that. And I was like, oh God, I'm afraid, but not really.
Oh God.
Yeah, like I'm excited, but so our Instagram again, TLOU podcast, our Twitter, TLOU podcast, our YouTube. Go there and just look up TLOU podcast and subscribe. We have a couple videos over there from Wayfarin Strangers. Every single one of these episodes of The Last Cast will be over there as well. It's important. We have a website, some pretty cool things over there. All of our shows, Wayfarin West, which is a travel series where we are endeavoring to go to every single location that is in the games. And now the show will be added to that. You can do that at tloupodcast.com. If you'd like to follow me everywhere, you can do that at Jaded Vader. If you'd like to follow Andrew everywhere, you can do that at Dark Driving. And if this weekly episode is still not enough for you, do not forget about our gameplay show, which I've talked about ad nauseum, Wayfarin Strangers, where we are going through currently The Last of Us Part 1, and then we will do Left Behind, and then The Last of Us Part 2. And we cover every single subsection of every single chapter in great, minute detail. So if that is for you, go on and check us out over there.
Excruciating detail, one might say.
Yes. I mean, look what we do with this show. We do that over there.
Right. If you like this, you'll love that.
Yeah. So that's all I got for this week.
With that, I'd like to tell you all, we'll be back next week on the journey to Bill and Frank. But until then, mind the vines.
Don't
make sure they're cooked.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
That's it. We're done.
Yeah, that's it. We're done.
Kisses. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Mycelium kisses.
No mycelium kisses. Bye, guys.
Bye.